Okay. Good morning, everyone, dear participants, dear panelists, dear speakers to this global workshop, virtual workshop on building urban economic resilience during and after the COVID-19 pandemic. My name is Katja Schäfer. I'm an interregional advisor with UN Habitat, and I will be taking you as a moderator through this workshop. It is a series of 2 workshops during today and next week's Monday. We are hosting this global workshop for the European region today, as well as for Asia Pacific region. And during the next week, we will be focusing on Latin American region, as well as I forgot. Sorry, for the Western Asian and Arab regions. It is an event that is jointly organized between the UN Habitat City Resilience Global Program, as well as the United Nations Capital Development Fund. As of today, the regional commissions of Eastern Europe, as well as the UN ESCAP, the Economic Commission for Asia Pacific region. I would like to ask the facilitator of the presentation to move to the next panel, because I would like to introduce let's say, the code of conduct of today's workshop. We have 3 hours for today. And I would like to ask all panelists and attendees to click the interpretation of the workshop in a language that is appropriate to you, either English or Russian. You can do so by clicking the interpretation button. And we would like to also kindly ask all the attendees to kindly turn off your microphone and the camera in order to avoid background noises. And you can also do so at the bottom toolbar. You can ask and upvote questions for all the moderators, the speakers, the panelists in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. And if there's any technical problems, challenges, please also do so and convey the message through the chat box at the bottom of the screen. I would like to introduce the agenda and then also the participants. So let me start with the participants, please. We have a very renowned attendance. Doris Andoni is the chair of the UNECE Committee on Urban Development, Housing and Land Management, the head of housing at the Ministry of Finance and Economy of Albania. Welcome, Doris. We have myself, as I introduced myself already, we have Jose Luis Haro, the head of the Emerging Local Economies at Barcelona Metropolitan Area. Welcome, Jose. Mr. Dimitri Pozidiaev, who's the global advisor at the UNCDF, Decentralization and Local Government Finance Department. Dimitri, welcome as well. Mr. Atsushi Koresawa is UN Habitat's Regional Director for the Asian Pacific region. Welcome, Atsushi. We have also Mr. Esteban Leon, who is leading the City Resilience Program at UN Habitat. Esteban, welcome. And then we have also Mr. Kurt Carrigan, who is the Chief of the Sustainable Urban Development Section at UN ESCAP, at the Division for Environment and Development. Welcome, Kurt. Brian Evans, who is the Chief Urbanist of the City of Glasgow. Welcome, Brian. Gulnara, good morning as well. Gulnara Roll is the Environmental Affairs Officer at the Economic Commission for Europe. And Mr. Omar Siddiq, welcome Omar, who is working at UNESCAP for the Economic Affairs Officer as the Sustainable Urban Development Department as well. We had last request as well from Tirana just yesterday. That unfortunately her name is not on the introduction. Her name is Tresi Trepika. She is the head of the Priorities Implementation Sector at the Department of Strategic Planning and Priorities Implementation at the Municipality of Tirana. We have also additional 4 case studies from the city of Subang Jaya in Malaysia. The mayor Noirani Roslan herself is sharing the experience from her city with us. Thank you, Madam Mayor, for attending. We also have the representatives from Kharkiv, in the city of Kharkiv in the Ukraine, Mikhail Fateyev. He is the deputy mayor to the city council. Thank you for joining us as well. And Mr. Omar El-Rawi, a member of the Vienna City Council, represent the experiences from Vienna. As well as we have Bikul Jeshenkulov, the head of the International Department of Protocol in Kyrgyzstan. I will tell every presenter and also the attendees just before the presentations which language to choose, just as a reminder as we move through the program. If I may introduce also the agenda of today's session, which is basically starting following opening remarks and a keynote speech. Then we will run an interactive session on the conceptual framework and urban economic resilience, following basically the keynote speech, and also present an overview of global practices, initial findings from the city resilience programming compiled. We will have the series of city presentations, as I had introduced the representatives from the cities, and followed by a panel dialogue, which includes the economic commissions present in this event, as well as the city of Tirana. We have a closing remark at the end, and I would like to please invite all the speakers to be very concise in their presentations, because we have only 3 hours and we would like to keep the time very tight. So without further ado, I wish all of us a wonderful discussion, a wonderful exchange of experiences, and would like to ask my colleagues for the introduction. So the opening remarks, Esteban, kindly, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Katia. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, perfect. Thanks. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are. Well, welcome to this meeting, to the virtual meeting. It's quite interesting that the whole world has become very virtual nowadays with this COVID-19. It's a great initiative, I think, the one that we are involved into. I have to thank my colleagues and friends from the regional commissions and from sister agencies. I think it's very important for us to start thinking how are we going to react all together to what we are living at this moment. It's from your habitat side, I will say, it's important for us to make sure that sustainable urbanization keeps going, even with this in these times of crisis and shocks that we always going to have. UN Habitat, as you know, is the agency for human settlements, is the agency working and supporting cities, and is the agency that is trying to make sure that we have a sustainable urbanization in a world that it's urbanizing more and more. We already know, and I don't think it's important for me to say that most of the world's population is now living in cities, and therefore it's one of the key areas or key contexts in which we have to start thinking how to respond, how to react, how to recover, and how to keep this sustainable urbanization going. I understand from our statistics that 90% of the COVID impact has been in cities. So that shows you quite the importance of the issue of working in these cities. I won't go into the statistics, or I won't go into the concepts or definitions. I just want to mention that if the idea is to have a sustainable urbanization, and we are confronting more and more these shocks that produces some stresses in our urban systems, we must start thinking ahead. We must have start thinking in preparedness. We must start thinking in disaster risk reduction, in resilience building. And I will say the typical case is this one. Nobody expected to have a pandemic that it was going to affect the whole globe. And here we are. And we are in the middle of a pandemic. If you asked me 6 months ago or 1 year ago if we were going to be in lockdown and close into our houses and staying in this kind of virtual meetings, I would have said no, impossible. At that time, we were traveling a lot. We had open borders to go and have meetings anywhere and everywhere. And potentially, if we start thinking in what are the lessons learned from this pandemic, is that we can actually survive without so many meetings, presential meetings and workshops. We can connect, as we are connecting now with agencies and people in Europe and in Asia Pacific, as in this virtual workshop, and we can discuss issues. And right now we have more than 130 participants, which in fact it would have been not conceivable if we are in a meeting room. And for sure that would have implied many travels around the world to be part of a meeting like this. So I think we have to take advantage of this new era, and we have to make sure that we can connect. And that's basically the objective of this workshop, right? I think we are all living, or we are all sailing in this world. We are all under the same storm, but we are not all in the same boat. And basically we have not only the same resources and the same boat, but we don't have the same captains either. And it's quite important for us to learn from other cities and from other countries what they are doing to recover from this crisis. And it's important because we can try to learn from the goods and bads. And that's the idea of this initiative, to collect some cases, to talk to some people who are confronting these issues, to learn from them, and to make sure that we can get the best approach possible to this crisis. I won't extend much more these introduction remarks, but I will say I think that it's important for all of us to be conscious that this is something that nobody expected. Everybody's trying, everybody is trying to see how to react, but this is the perfect way for us to see how resilient we are, and how our systems were, produced in a manner that we can recover quickly from this crisis. The health crisis came first, and the socioeconomic crisis is coming, and it will remain for longer, I think. So we have to make sure that we learn from these lessons. Thank you, Katia, and thank you, colleagues, for participating. It has been an impressive work in just few months, and learning from many of you. And yeah, we expect a good interventions, and we expect to learn quite a lot. Thank you, Katia.
Thank you, Esteban. Doris, would you like to please give your opening remarks? Thank you, Doris.
Doris seems to be muted.
Yeah, Doris, you seem to be muted.
Okay, I can. Somebody muted me, but okay. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So welcome to to this global workshop on building urban economic resilience during and after COVID-19. It's the 153rd day since the world changed forever. Well, this is a strong statement, and I'm not sure if we changed forever or we will go back to our pre-COVID pandemic normality. But one thing is sure, that history of humans has shown that similar events have signed a turning point in the social and economic development. And for sure that also this pandemic has signed a turning point in our history. We don't know how it will come, but this is also our role to think for the future. During these lockdown days, we have witnessed also one of the most unprecedented situations. The most populated cities and squares, they became empty. It's very visible nowadays, the intersection of urban design and public health that is increasingly a critical theory. And again, if we look back to the history, some of the most iconic developments in urban planning and management developed in response to public health crises such as plague or cholera, and nowadays COVID pandemics. I have followed different discussions of professionals during this period. I've read a lot of articles, and there are a lot of questions raised by professional urban economists and sociologists. If suburbs nowadays are safer from coronavirus than the dense and compact cities, if the strength of big and vibrant cities are becoming their weakness nowadays, but these are just big questions that we need to discuss and to look forward. And another question is if working from home will become a normality. 1 or more years ago, I read an article about young professionals that choose to live in remote areas and to work from home because of housing affordability problem. So we have also to think in this context, because not every, so these are challenges that may bring also some opportunities in the future. Another opportunity is also what NASA has shown us about the, through images of before and after lockdown, improved air quality in regions, in different regions. And this is also food for thought on how we can improve, what we should do to improve the quality of life of our citizens. And one example, for example, is the city of Milan, which has historically struggled with smoke and now is thinking about ways to reduce air pollution post-pandemic by introducing a plan to reduce car use. But I cannot avoid not mentioning one of the painful situation and one of the most pressing issues that need a serious engagement of governments and international partners, which is that of homeless people and those that suffered the consequences of the pandemic by becoming unemployed. Well, the advice, global advice, stay home, wash your hands, social distancing are not applicable for homeless people and for those that live in precarious situations. Despite of different measures, political policy responses that are taken by different countries that you can see from this graph from OECD research that was done during the pandemic. Well, perhaps I didn't present myself. My name is Doris Andoni. I'm head of the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe Committee on Urban Development, Housing and Land Management. And back home, I am also Director of Housing in the Ministry of Finance and Economy. Our committee brings together senior government officials from 56 countries in the UNEC region. It is the only intergovernmental body addressing the housing and urban development challenges in the UNEC region. The committee was established in 1947 as a response to the housing crisis of post-Second World War, with a mission to reconstruct the housing stock and cities in Europe. In face of the pandemic, its role So the role of our committee becomes again very important, and well, with the revised mission to serve as an important platform for facilitating and exchanging the practices and experiences to overcome multiple challenges that our countries and cities face, including those which we face during and after pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic. We will have our 81st session of the committee that will be held in Geneva between 6 and 8 October, where we will discuss the country's approaches in these challenges. And I would like to use this opportunity to invite you to join the meeting and to discuss together these approaches. Our work is based on UN documents which deal with housing and urban development, and including Geneva UN Charter on Sustainable Housing that was endorsed in 2015 by the member states, and it expresses the political will of member states, of 56 member states, to ensure a high quality of life for their citizens through the provision of adequate, safe, healthy housing and sustainable cities. According to the Geneva UN Charter, national policies and planning are often inadequate to prevent and minimize damages from disaster and emergency situations. This is something that has been discussed and will be discussed also during the 81st session of the committee. Finally, I'd like also to inform you about the Forum of Mayors that will take place for the first time as part of the committee session. The Forum of Mayors, our committee considers of utmost importance connecting national representatives that are responsible for designing and approving policies and legislation with local authorities that are responsible for implementation of these policies. And we want to make sure that there is a good connection between what we discuss at the committee sessions with what is expected and what problems of local authorities are. So that's why the Forum of Mayors will provide a platform for local governments to discuss how cities can better adapt, prepare and respond to emergencies, including the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as local responses to the effects of climate change and disasters. So I don't want to extend more because I know that we are running out of time already. I just want to conclude with statements by two mayors, Mayor of Budapest, Hungary, Mr. Gergely Karasconi, and Mr. Gregor Macedoni, Mayor of Novo Mesto, Slovenia, that has confirmed their engagement for being in the front line of climate mitigation, as well as being inspiring change and strength to strengthen the resilience of the cities. Thank you very much, and I wish good and successful continuation of this workshop, and also expecting to have some outcomes and to see what we can do in the future to revise and also to reflect in our working plans. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doris, for your presentation and the representation actually of UNECE's work. And I would like to ask Kurt as well to give a very brief introduction and also introduce the work of UNESCAP. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Katja. Let me share my screen. Can you see my presentation?
Not yet.
How about now?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thanks again, Katja, for the kind introduction. And I'm pleased to be joined by colleagues with me at ESCAP, but warm greetings from UN ESCAP here in Bangkok. And we're happy to be collaborating with our fellow UN agencies on this project, especially UN Economic Commission for Europe, which along with the Economic Commission for Africa convened all agencies in this project, including UN Habitat, the UN Capital Development Fund, ECLAC from the Latin American region, and the Economic and Social Commission for West Asia to develop this project. As Katja mentioned, this workshop is being delivered to both the ESCAP and the UNECE region. And I think actually I have to pause because my screen is not showing the correct document. Hold on just a moment, please.
Kurt, are you still there?
I'm still here. Do you see the screen again? I'm sorry.
No, it is not yet there.
Having a little bit of technical
Now
problems.
it's there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So again, apologies. I wanted to extend our thanks to our fellow UN agencies for developing this workshop and overall this project, and a special thanks to all the city partners for joining this workshop and committing your time to this project. I'd like to take just a bit of time to introduce overall the project to all participants here. We all know, and as Esteban mentioned, the significant health impacts of COVID and the devastation to economies that have resulted from the response measures. The impacts, as all of you know, are especially acute in urban areas and affecting labor productivity, employment, and revenues. No one is more aware of the challenges than the mayors and the city officials who are navigating daily the impacts and the response to the pandemic. This project will assist city leaders to address recovery from the areas that you see here, so massive loss of jobs and unemployment, the severe reductions in local government revenues, which are impacting operations, as well as long-term, short and long-term planning efforts and abilities to finance much needed infrastructure, and the overall losses to urban economies. The overall objectives of the project are to strengthen the capacities of local governments, and you'll hear about the structural framework for building resilience for urban economic resilience, including the business, financial environments, labor market conditions, and economic governance in a later presentation. But all of this should support helping cities to build sustainable, resilient, and inclusive economic and financial responses, and to develop robust recovery and rebuilding plans. The project will contribute to planning for more resilient cities and assist local governments to be better positioned to withstand future shocks from further pandemics, future economic or other shocks to urban systems that are likely to recur in an emerging urban world. And the implementation of the project will link with other dimensions of urban resilience, looking at social, spatial, and governance contexts within each of the specific regions. As already mentioned, the executing agencies, this is really a UN partnership working with all of the cities brought together in this project to share experiences across regions and across the globe, and bring really the best practices and best response examples to COVID to our partner cities. So the 5 regional commissions are involved, and then strong technical collaboration with UN Habitat and UN Capital Development Fund. The partner cities across the globe are seen here. We have 4 cities that we'll be working with in the SCAP region. For SCAP, it'll be in Fiji, in Malaysia, and you'll hear from the Subang Jaya mayor later, Hoi An in Vietnam, and Pune in India. And again, you'll have the opportunity to hear from representatives from some of these target cities. The project activities will focus really on developing the recovery and resilience planning opportunities. So there will be an activity that looks at what are the planning tools that could be delivered and support cities in developing their long-term resilience strategies, looking at data collection and analysis on the ground in cities, and the application of a planning tool that will be developed and delivered to support those cities. Next activity will again look at strengthening the economic recovery and resilience strategies for each of the cities. Each of the regional commissions and our technical partners will support with local stakeholder visioning and scenario planning workshops to take a long-term view of recovery, but also to be better prepared for any future pandemics. We'll also develop and disseminate information packages on financial sources available to each city based on the plans and strategies that they develop, so that all of this leads to sound, financially feasible, and bankable activities proposed by each of the cities. And then each of the cities will have a monitoring and evaluation framework that supports them in further implementation. As you see here, the benefits for the participating cities are fairly numerous, and it's really incumbent upon all of the project teams, agencies, to work with the cities and the local stakeholders to make the most of this project. What the project will help to bring to the cities are experiences and practices, and really focused on innovation of cities around the world, but sharing that both through workshops, through city-based activities, and working with local stakeholders. There will also be the opportunities through the regional commissions to bring those best practices, the lessons, and the experiences to the regional forums on sustainable development and the UN regional collaborative platforms, which also engage with agencies beyond those that are listed in this project. So many of the UN system agencies would be available to see what's happening in the cities and potentially provide further support beyond the project. One of the important elements here is the co-learning and the sharing of insights across cities and the dialogues that you'll be able to have. So the peer-to-peer exchange among cities and the opportunities to see what is happening elsewhere in the region, but also elsewhere across the globe, as all cities are facing similar challenges to response and recovery. There will be technical support towards the economic and financial recovery and the rebuilding strategies that are developed in each city. And we expect all cities to benefit from enhanced knowledge and evidence-based materials that will help them to make informed policymaking going forward. Here you see the initial project timeline. We're currently in the data collection and the compendium of best practices early stage, and this workshop is really kind of kicking off some of the activities directly with cities. We'll proceed through the end of the year with diagnostics and city level workshops in each of the respective regions. And then over the longer term through next year, the development of the recovery and strategy plans. So it's an ambitious program. I'm pleased again to be joined by our fellow regional commission, and you've already heard from UNECE, but here are our contacts. At the top here you see the picture of UNECE headquarters in Geneva and the SCAP headquarters in Bangkok. We look forward to working with all of you and the dialogue today, and Katya, back over to you.
Thank you very much, Kurt, and also thank you for sharing some images of the locations of your economic commissions. I would like to actually invite as the next speaker, our keynote speaker, José Luis Haro, who is the head of the Emerging Local Economies Department at the Barcelona metropolitan area. He will be presenting his keynote speech with the topic on understanding metabolism, the service of the green and circular economy on the example of Barcelona. Welcome, Jose, and over to you.
Hello, thank you very much. I'm going to share my screen. Well, hello everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is José Luis Haro, and it's for me an honor being here to present what we are doing in the Barcelona metropolitan area. Let's see. I'm responsible of a department called Local Emerging Economies, and I will explain later why I think our programs represent a relevant perspective for local economic policies in the post-COVID-19 context. But now let's see our territorial reality. As you can see in these figures, Barcelona metropolitan area represents only the 2% of Catalan territory, but we concentrate almost half the population, the jobs, and the GDP of Catalonia. And these figures also represent a main node of the GDP and the industrial activity of the whole of Spain. But this territory, this is the difference with other metropolises, is not managed by a single council, but by 36, being the main one, of course, Barcelona, which concentrates half the population. And this is the main reason for the existence of the metropolitan administration. The EMB is the public administration in charge of managing the infrastructures that guarantee the smooth functioning of the metropolitan city. The Metropolitan Economy Agency was created to assist the councils in their development policies in those issues that need a coordinated action, as internationalization programs, super business, infrastructures, in economy activity stage, and so on. But maybe one of the novelties was the creation of the Department of Local Emerging Economies. This department is in charge of policies oriented to mobilize local assets to meet local needs with a self-centered strategy. We look for boosting the endogenous assets, feeding the social capital to promote economic activity at the service of the citizens of the territory, strengthening the social and economic fabric and building a resilient economy. It is a complementary perspective to the two traditional local economies policies aimed, on the one hand, at attracting foreign investment and, on the other, at promoting the access of local companies to the global markets. And COVID-19 pandemic is resulting in a huge disturbance of our economic and social fabric, in addition to the tremendous impact on human lives, as we all know. In the blue box, you can see some of the economic and labor effects that pandemic has caused in our economy. The effects are very relevant, being one of the OECD countries with a more pronounced impact, probably due to the weight of our services sector and tourism. In this way, we shouldn't understand the pandemic as an isolated event, but as some scholars and organizations have pointed out, as an event related with the environmental degradation, with the climate change, and with the biodiversity loss. And all these problems are in turn related to the ways in which economic activity is organized in our societies, at least in higher income countries. We know, therefore, that we must change our modes of production and consumption if we want to face the challenges that we already have here. We know this at the level of our cities, but also of the state and other organizations, such as the European Union itself, which has developed an ambitious plan to promote the sustainability of our economy activity with very ambitious objectives for the year 2030 and 2050. In short, it's no longer an option, but a necessity if we want to guarantee the well-being of our citizens and future generations, to build a resilient economy, I mean. And this was the goal of the Circular and Green Economy Support Service that we created at the end of 2019. We want to promote the transformation of local industrial and economic activity in line with the principles of the green and circular economy. And we promote this to contribute to the increase in the efficiency of raw materials, water and energy in industrial processes. That is why we provide training and technical assistance both to officials in charge of local development policies and to companies that want to start projects to increase their efficiency. And we have learned during these months that we need better information on the environmental performance of our economy. To take these practices one step further, we need to know more to detect new opportunities, to design better targeted policies, and of course, to measure their impact. And that is what we have done. Next September, we will present the view of the industrial ecosystem of the metropolitan area. We have created an unified database that collects the existing information on raw materials, waste, energy, and water consumption of the metropolitan companies. As you can see in this yellow box, there is a first block of administrative and commercial information that allow us to link the different tables that make up the database. Information on raw materials and waste is added to this initial information. These data are extracted from the annual declaration of industrial waste that companies must submit to the Catalan government. And afterwards, we have incorporated the information on water and electricity consumption. This information has been provided by the utilities companies. To this information, we have added data on the potential of photovoltaic and solar thermal generation that exists on the roofs of the economic activity estates. This data has been created by the Department of Ecology of the ENB, which also works in issues related with the resilience of the territory. And finally, we have added information on other underutilized capacities that are interesting from the point of view of promoting projects between companies, such as underused warehouses, treatment plants, furnaces, tanks, etc. However, this information is only obtained through interviews, so the database will be gradually completed. Much of this data already exists in public registries. The relevant point here is their systematization to form a homogeneous and usable database. On the other hand, some of this data is subject to a certain degree of confidentiality. Thus, as an economic development agency, as a public administration, our use will be limited to helping in the design of local development policies and to collaborating with municipalities and companies themselves in taking advantage of such opportunities. But even more relevant is that this database allows us to learn new things about the industrial ecosystem of our territory. Knowing the economic activities and the declared waste by companies, we can detect the existing opportunities to develop industrial symbiosis projects. It is an initial information which must then be worked out with the agents involved. But it allows us to have a first overview of our economic activities on the raw materials and secondary raw materials that circulate in the metropolitan economic metabolism. In the same way, it allows us to detect, for example, areas where it can be economically efficient to establish reused water networks for the use of a certain number of companies, or maybe shared systems of energy cogeneration, or for example, to promote the creation of district heating between different companies to take advantage of the residual heat of some industrial processes from a certain company. And we can analyze this data for certain economic activities states, for certain municipalities, or for the entire metropolitan area. That allows us to analyze company by company what their potentialities are, to prioritize the goals of the local economic departments, focusing on those actions that can have the most relevant impact on improving environmental efficiency. Or even the possibility of developing circularity strategies between firms in a certain area. It allows us to know if those areas concentrate industries with the same raw material or waste that could recommend promoting the installation of other economic activities that can take advantage of the flows of this material in order to increase the environmental efficiency of the whole. To finish, I just wanted to stress that this database will allow us to bring out a new layer of information on the economy of the metropolitan city. Information that tells us about the environmental impact of our economy activity, and that has to allow us to articulate policies to promote circular efficiency and social and economic development. I believe that this monitor will lead us to develop new projects in the field of local development, such as the ones that I list here. As I have pointed out before, the environmental challenge will lead us to understand economic activity areas as a more holistic spaces where interconnections between companies have to promote innovation, competitiveness, and overall efficiency, where the transition to a circular mode of production has to contribute finally to making our cities more resilient. That's it. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope this presentation has been interesting for all of you. Thanks again to the organization for inviting me to participate. If you have any questions or queries, here is my mail. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jose, for actually spanning the frame, you know, from local economic development across the resilience discussion, the climate discussion, focusing on circular economy, and linking it yet again to the pandemic and how this could be also a vehicle for the recovery of certain elements in the economic sector. Thanks a lot. That's very illustrative. I think it has been quite a challenge to bring this all together. And I'm sure many of the cities are very inspired and will be in contact with you. And thank you also for being very concise with your presentation. We gained a bit more time. I would like to actually invite my colleagues from the UN Habitat team to run us through an interactive session so that we can move a little bit on the chairs, because we have had a lot of presentations at the moment. We would like to actually map the participants to better understand, and then over to you, my colleagues.
So thank you, Katya, and good morning and afternoon to everyone. So after those enlightening speeches from our opening and keynote speakers, we would like to get to know a little bit more about our attendees and provide a means for you to share with us your views by having a series of live polling interactive segments. So I would like to invite everyone to participate by joining us by going to the menti.com website. You can see it on the top of the screen. And on your device, and inputting the code 900084. So these interactive sessions would be interspersed throughout the session. So I would recommend that you keep the website open, and we'll have several of these throughout. Also, if you have any questions for speakers, please feel free to use the question and answer box, and we'll try to answer a bit more of this later. So let's begin with some very simple questions about our attendees today. Yes, so first, very simple, which region are you from? So great, seems like we have a good balance of Asia Pacific and Europe so far. And some representation from other regions. So hello, it's great that you can join us for this session as well. So the voting closes in 30 seconds, although perhaps we can, yeah. So if anyone is having difficulty accessing the presentation, you can go to menti.com and input the code 9000084, which is stated above. Great, so I can see we have almost an equal number of representation from Asia Pacific and Europe, and some participants from other regions. And so let's go to our next question. And so which sector are you affiliated with? So it's great to see that there seems to be representation from different sectors. And this is also spread out throughout the different regions. So the voting will close in 3, 2, 1. Great. And next, because our topic today is the concept of urban economic resilience, how familiar are you with this concept before the start of this workshop? Okay, so it seems like there is a middling level of familiarity with the concept, maybe more leaning slightly towards more familiar. So it would be great to know that we already have some of these base concepts. For most of us, we already have this base concept in mind, and we can further this discussion throughout the rest of the session. And finally, so this is, please feel free to let us know if there's an topic that you're most interested to learn about in today's workshop. I think I will keep this on for now, and we can save time by going to the next session. And I will flash this again later.
Thank you very much. So dear participants, please feel free to continue adding your inputs to this slide, which we will return to later. I would like to actually invite Dimitri Postdiaev from UNCDF to describe actually the conceptual framework and on urban economic resilience, while the participants also still can suggest areas of discussion or of interest. Dimitri, are you ready to come in?
Yes, I am. And thank you so much, Katja, for your introduction. Well, since we appear to have a pretty good level of understanding of resilience, we probably can skip this session and move to the next one. Just joking. I'm not going to do that. Well, so the project that we are presenting today and discussing today focuses on urban economic resilience. Of course, as we all understand, resilience is more than just the economy. And there are some other important aspects of resilience, such as social, environmental. Of course, the entire area of infrastructure resilience is very important. But by nature of the project, we are focusing on just the economic aspect of resilience. But in doing so, of course, we should not forget that the concept of resilience is much bigger than what we are discussing here. I hope you can see my screen.
We can.
Very good. Very good. Well, so what do we mean by urban economic resilience? We need to unpack it to make sure that we have the same understanding of urban economic resilience, and that the activities that we are taking make sense within that concept. By urban economic resilience, we mean the capacity and related capabilities of urban communities, mostly in the context of negative shocks, including long-term stresses to their economies. Why we are doing that? Obviously, because the current pandemic has demonstrated the high degree of vulnerability of many urban economies to the kind of massive shocks on both the demand and supply sides, which COVID-19 has presented. And again, interestingly, it has affected different urban areas differently. We have heard already some feedback from some of the partner cities. Sometimes the cities with lower levels of economic development has suffered less damage from COVID-19 than other more prosperous and more advanced ones. So I believe this all creates this interesting challenge for us to understand what has happened and how resilience in urban areas can be operationalized. So we are talking about capacities and related capabilities in two big areas. One is to plan for and anticipate, and the other one is to reallocate and mobilize resources for what? To withstand those shocks that we have mentioned, recover from those shocks, and then rebuild at least to the pre-crisis levels. And there is also a longer-term dimension as we are dealing with the crisis, and I believe it has come out very clearly in the presentation of our colleague from Barcelona. There is this futuristic element as well in resilience, because while recovering, we would also like to place economies on the path to sustainable economic growth, while simultaneously strengthening their capacity to deal with any future shocks. And when we are talking about rebuilding and recovering, what are the indicators that would demonstrate this recovery path? Together with colleagues and through a series of various discussions, we have agreed on 4 major indicators, which include stable gross city product growth per capita, without significant deviations and significant drops or rises. It is also a stable or even increasing own source revenue growth, depending on the actual situation in a particular locality. It is stable and or increasing labor force participation rates. And last but not least is declining inequality rates. As we all know, this probably has not been discussed as yet, but as we all know, what COVID-19 has exposed is the existing inequalities, not only income inequalities, which is the most obvious probably sign, but also various types of non-income inequalities. The way we have modeled urban economic resilience is in 4 key areas. It is business environment, labor market, financial environment, and economic governance. The reason for that was to try to address the key elements of urban economy and the key factors, which are, of course, capital, labor, and land, including natural resources. We can also add to that the entrepreneurial element in the form of knowledge and technologies and so on and so forth. So to cover all this and to bring them into the same model, we have analyzed what would be the key indicators and the key factors that would determine urban economic resilience in those 4 big areas. Obviously, I will not go through each and every of them, but why we have undertaken this exercise is because it helps, it suggests certain actions for cities. When we are talking about business environment, and for example, we take the supply chain element of it, what the crisis has exposed is the vulnerability of global supply chains. That's very obvious. So when we are talking and thinking about urban economic resilience, and particularly the business environment within the city economy, we should also have a look at the existing supply chains. To what extent the city is dependent on a global or regional supply chains? What could be the substitutes in case of, as this crisis has demonstrated? To what extent we use local supply chains, local materials, local resources? Is there a potential to increase, to tap more into those resources? So all those factors are very important. Of course, the financial environment in itself, the situation of debt and equity markets, as well as government financing and financial technology. Everyone is talking about fintechs, and the digital access to finance is very important. And last but not least, economic governance. Of course, colleagues present at this session realize that cities are not islands. They operate within the bigger national macroeconomic environment. So how macroeconomic environment influences and how it can be used to improve urban economic resilience is a very important task. And I believe what this project does, among other things, is enabling an advocacy platform for cities to be able to advocate for changes in those macroeconomic conditions and certain policy and regulatory arrangements that would allow cities to improve their economic resilience. I'm finishing with some principles which we suggest for building urban economic resilience. There are some general principles, and you would not be surprised to find such principles as prioritization, efficiency. But what I would like to stress is the need for an entrepreneurial state. I believe the consortium of the organizations behind this particular project is promoting an activist government, a government that actually leads and directs local development, including the resilience aspects of it. I think what this crisis has demonstrated, despite deserved allocates for the private sector to be able to respond, but what it has demonstrated on its own, the private sector cannot respond to a crisis of such dimensions as COVID-19. And hence the role of an able and capacitated government is extremely important. As Mariana Mazzucato called one of her recent articles, it is the big failure of a small government that has undermined our response. There are also some principles for managing the COVID-19 response. They are also rather obvious. We need to learn lessons from the crisis, and there are a number of lessons. Of course, cities would need to adjust it and adapt it to their own experiences. It is how exactly we finance recovery and reconstruction, and how we can do it in more innovative ways and less traditional. It is the principle of leaving no one behind and dealing with inequalities, both income and non-income inequalities. It is mainstreaming resilience throughout local economic planning and other types of planning, and last but not least, promoting sustainable development. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dimitri, for your illustration on urban resilience in the economic sector. It is quite, how to say, a good introduction actually to the concepts, which I think has stimulated a lot of questions amongst the participants. And I would like to again invite everyone to engage actively in the Q&A chat box, and we will as we go through the workshop, also make sure that we address some of the key questions as we speak. So please kindly engage, while I am asking actually my colleague Amaya to give us a broad overview on global practices so far that we have been looking into, and to stimulate actually the participants as well to add additional practices if they seem appropriate. Amaya, I would like to invite you for running through your presentation.
Thanks to everybody. I am Amaya Zelaya from UN Habitat team, and I will give a brief overview of global practices collected for local economic recovery and resilience building. It's important to explain that, next slide, please. It's important to explain that we are working on the first phase of a project that luckily will have at least 3. Kurt has already explained it. Of course, we have the questionnaire that some of you already know. We are now immersed in the first of our 2 global virtual workshops that we are going to run this August. You can also join us on Monday. And the questionnaire is going to be open till September, so we are in time to fill in the survey as for the cities that could be interested in. And we will have a global compendium of practices that will be working working on live document, thought to pave the way for lessons learned and further training and advices to be given for the future of cities in crisis that will come in October. We have around 20 cities with the survey complete. You can see the names there. We have the survey already prepared in Arab, English, Russian, and Spanish versions, so it's open for almost everyone. As for cities classification, you can see in the graphics that we have around 30% of cities that are secondary cities and 70% of them that are primary ones. The graphic of activity clearly shows that activity has been increasing in the survey, and this is one of the reasons why we decided to open it until mid-September so far. And what the survey is about? So it's only 14 questions, and it's very important for us to explain that we try to make it very easy with a combination of narrative, explanatory answers, and other ones that need a bit more accurate data with multiple choice selection so as to be able to extract some basic statistics that you are going to see today. We are asking about the crisis timeline, the challenges that the cities are facing. We ask, sorry, we also ask about impacts, of course, structured through the backbone that UNCDF has provided, which means labor markets, business environment, financial environment, and economic governance arrangements. We are very interested about the role of local government in managing the crisis and the potential contributions and coordinations among actors. We ask also about potential examples of economic responses from public sector or other local stakeholders. And of course, when it comes to the measures, we are interested in knowing if these measures are aligned with the new urban agenda as UN Habitat. And the new urban agenda main principles are leaving no one behind, ensuring sustainability and inclusivity in urban economies, and of course, ensuring also environmental sustainability. UNCDF has already talked about main aspects of urban resilience. From UN Habitat, when it comes to the definition of what is urban resilience, It's important to highlight that it's something measurable from a systemic way of thinking, that we count not only on citizens, but on all the inhabitants of the urban settings, that we have to take into consideration that we must keep continuity and operations maintenance through all shocks and stresses, and that any action or measure we could think of should be sustainable and transform our reality for the better. As for the concrete questions and answers that we have got from the survey, when it comes to crisis response and coordination among actors, even if we are analyzing from the survey, coming from the more narrative and explanatory answers, we can see that around 55% of cities did not have any emergency response plan in place. That in some regions, there is a lack of timely response for the most vulnerable. Some people in the chat are already highlighting it. And that most of the cities are now developing economic reanimation plans, mainly with innovative sources of finance, together with citizens, businesses, and organizations. As for concrete questions, question 6, about contribution of local government, central government, and local private stakeholders in addressing COVID impacts, we can see that with regards to labor markets, all partners and central government, according to the answers, are contributing equally. But when it comes to business environment, financial environment, and economic governance arrangements, of course, the central government role is the most important one. And when we talk about the delivery of key public services and local business, government business continuity is the local government. Question 8, about measures that the city is undertaking or is planning to take so as to manage the impacts of the COVID crisis. For labor markets, we can see that 95% of answers are talking about regulation of working conditions in compliance with COVID-19 health requirements. Also, 90% of answers are talking about dissemination of relevant health information to workers. About business environment, 95% of answers are talking about the role of local government for maintenance and disinfection of public space, streets, public squares, municipal markets, etc. As for financial environment, 60% of answers are talking about the support and promotion of mobile, money, digital financial translations, and also collection of related data. That is one of the things we are doing, of course, here today and with the survey. As for economic governance arrangements, mainly we could be talking about the establishment of institutional structures to manage the economic impacts and recovery acceleration with specialized committees, platforms, and mechanisms for information sharing, awareness raising, and dialogue with citizens. And for local government, business continuity, adequate fiscal space, and delivery of key public services is mainly about the reprioritization and reprogramming of existing municipal budgets to increase availability of finance in critical areas. About the alignment of these measures with the 3 key principles of the new urban agenda, from strongly disagree to strongly agree, so from dark blue to light green, as you can see in the screen, we have mainly quite positive questions about the alignment with leaving no one behind, also positive questions with the alignment with sustainable and inclusive urban economies, and also with the alignment with environmental sustainability. So I'm going just to finish talking about how we are in the survey now. As you can see, there are a lot of questionnaires that are open. So only 20 cities have completed the questionnaire, but we are waiting for more. You can see that at least there are 10 more cities that are going to come. You can see they're listed. And of course, we are waiting for more responses. So if within the attendees there is someone that could be interested in joining our survey and helping us in this analysis of potential measures that cities could be undertaking for sustainable and inclusive recovery, please contact us, because we can provide the link and all the support you can be need so as to fill the questionnaire. And thanks.
Thank you very much, Amaya, and thanks also for the invitation for cities to nominate themselves and volunteering, basically, and sharing their experiences in order to stimulate also for other cities to get inspired about certain measures. And I think it is also quite interesting to exchange, in fact, contacts and ideas directly, because I think peers talking to peers is always very inspiring. I would like to actually ask now Anna to go back to our Mentimeter exercise and take us basically through what are the most pressing economic impacts that COVID has had on your cities and what we are interested to learn about in today's workshop.
Sorry, I keep on forgetting to unmute. So as you can see, these are some of the responses you provided from the last question. I will move on to the next, for the next session. So like Katja was saying, please respond to what do you think are some of the most pressing economic impacts of COVID-19 crisis in your city. Again, you can access this through menti.com using the code 900084, and you can write just keywords that you believe are the most pressing, economic impacts. Great. So as we can see here, the word unemployment has been highlighted. Even as we start adding more words. And other words that have been repeated: inequality, poverty, job loss. Great, thank you so much for answering this question. And I think this will provide a lot of insights later on to our panel. The next question is, so based on the 4 categories that was explained by UNCDF, how satisfied are you about your city's interventions in the following areas? The area of labor markets, business environments, financial environment, and economic governance arrangements. So it seems like most of the categories are in the lower end of the spectrum. And this probably means that there's still a lot of things that we should learn about how to properly respond to this crisis to be able to be more resilient. Great. Okay, so let's move on to the next. And the last question would be, what are some priority actions to improve economic resilience of your city in the light of COVID-19 experiences? Again, keywords that you think should be priority actions to improve the economic resilience of the city. So there's a lot of ideas being thrown around here. That's great. As we can see as well, employment is highlighted, probably because of the immense impact it had, the COVID-19 crisis had on employment. Other big items would be housing, economic development, mobility, social care. So 5 more seconds to throw in your answer. Thank you so much. Again, it seems like we have a lot of ideas thrown around, and this will definitely help us with the discussions later. And so if you have any questions for the speakers, you can ask your questions under the Zoom Q&A box. I don't know if we have time, Katya, for some questions now.
We have a bit of time. Let's give each other 5 minutes maybe to go through this before we have a break, a short break. So Anna, please.
I guess some of the questions that have been upvoted. Well, first is very interesting survey. How can cities participate in the survey? We will provide you the link to this. And it is also in the event page. You can find the link to this survey from there. I think one of my colleagues will provide a link. Another question that has been upvoted is a question by Manuel Carmona Yebra. Without climate, or maybe that is a comment rather than a question. So just a comment would be, without climate action in cities, greening measures, the economy is as a house of cards to be wiped out by the next tropical cyclone or flood. I don't know if anyone wants to respond to this. If not, we can, there's this question also about address a lot of our, so there's a long question by Tane Taylor about addressing urban economic resilience must be reviewed in the context of rural resilience. So if you read the question, it's the one that's been upvoted on the top. I think it's a comment on the rural side of, well, about the connection between urban and rural. So does any of our speakers want to comment on this?
Well, allow me to quickly comment on that. That's an absolutely relevant remark. And when we spoke about resilient planning as one of the factors, so mainstreaming resilience into planning and budgeting, economic planning, that's one of the factors, because what is lacking in many cases is a regional approach to urban planning. Again, urban areas are not islands, not only in relation to national economies, but of course they are not islands in relation to the surrounding areas. And establishing the linkages, the rural-urban linkages, and utilizing them properly will definitely contribute to the economic resilience of not only urban areas, but also rural areas, particularly in many developing countries where, in fact, many urban residents have some agricultural occupation as their additional secondary activity. So that's a very, very apt remark. Totally agree.
Do we have one more time for one more question, or should we go on our coffee break now?
No, I think let's maybe there's quite a few comments that are related to the interlinkage between the pandemic and climate change. Maybe Esteban, would you like to reflect on that? And definitely, I think I encourage also the panelists to answer some of the questions if you deem, if they seem appropriate for you. And otherwise, we will definitely take them up and find answers also as part of the compendium. So Esteban, would you like to reflect on this?
Yeah, sure. I was going to write in the questions and answers, but I was writing, in fact. Yeah, I think that it's a very interesting question because I saw a graphic once some time ago that was very interesting. It was a kind of waves, and the first wave in a sea, right? And the first wave was the COVID-19, and the second larger wave was the economy and finance, but the economy of impact of the COVID-19, and a third huge wave was the climate change issue, and it was very, very illustrative of what's going on. I mean, I think that human nature makes us respond to the emergency immediately, and the emergency is life-saving, right? It's making sure that everybody is healthy and well. But we tend to forget that the long-term vision is to make sure that we don't fall again into the same trap. And I think that kind of summarizes quite well what the holistic approach to resilience should be. I mean, if you think well, the problems did not disappear by COVID-19. I mean, they just increased and were emphasized. Climate change is still there. Climate change is the most important issue that humans are confronting, human and planet. So basically, I think that we have to keep in our heads that COVID is a pandemic virus that did not make climate change impact disappear of the globe. And therefore, all our actions should be still be very much geared by what's going to happen in the world if we continue to live the way we used to live. So in a way, I think that this COVID-19 crisis could have been an opportunity for all of us to start rethinking the way we live and the economic model we have. I mean, this economic model is the one that is taking us through so many problems, climate change issues, but derived from high consumption, from overpopulation, consumption that it's increasing more and more, and a way of living that is completely unsustainable. And therefore, potentially, I think, and I agree with many comments that say that probably this is a chance to change. This is a chance to make sure that we are more conscious of what we do to the planet and to ourselves. Because at the end of the day, you know, I mean, some time ago, I wrote an article where I was saying exactly the same, that if you see nature recover quite quickly, you know, a week or a month after the lockdown, you could see that the sky was clearer, that the rivers and the sea and the waters were cleaner, and the nature was recovering quite quickly, while our economies are going to take some time to recover, and that shows that we actually have been producing something that is not as sustainable as nature is. That's my reading of it, and I think that while we are discussing economy and how cities should recover from this socioeconomic crisis, we are not taking for granted that we have that larger problem that is climate change, and we are not taking for granted that we have to start taking measures to confront that issue. We are focusing very much, because we have 2 or 3 hours in this discussion, on the economic impact, but that doesn't mean that we are not aware of what climate change is and what climate change is doing to our planet and ourselves. And I think that that's important to mention, and it's very important for us to be conscious that whatever decision we take politically or policy-wise, it has to be made sure that we consider the long-term view, as in any crisis situation. Over. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Esteban, for this comprehensive answer, and bringing also the different elements, dimensions of building back better together here. And I, in fact, would like to look also at our, personal physical and psychological health for the next 5 to 7 minutes, and would like to invite us all to stretch our legs, have a glass of water, and come back at 9:40 my time, let's say in 8 minutes, and then we will resume with the city case studies, which I think will be quite an interesting introduction in traveling across the regions and exploring different practices on the ground from representatives of the different cities. So I will mute myself and also the video, and we will see you back in 7.5 minutes. Thank you very much. Welcome back after a short coffee break. I hope you have had a bit of time to relax and feel a bit more refreshed to resume the second part of this workshop. Now, in fact, we would like to engage with the practitioners actually from the different cities. And Mayor Noraini Roslan, if you are available, I would like to invite you to present your case study from the city of Subang Jaya in Malaysia.
Hi, thank you, Katya.
Thank you. Welcome.
Good morning and good afternoon to most of us in Asia Pacific. I'm glad to see that we can still communicate even though it's online, and I miss all the international travel. Let me introduce you briefly to my city. Subang Jaya is only about 17 kilometers away from Kuala Lumpur, and we are sitting in an area of 161 square kilometers, and we have about 1 million population. And for the past COVID episode, we are not that badly affected. So far, there's only one death and about 100 people affected within the city itself. But for the whole nation, we did go through a very strict measure of movement control order, which is quite unpopular in the Europe and American side. But here in Asia, people are more obliging. The government says that you can't move between infected areas and non-infected areas especially. And when the federal government imposed the nationwide movement control order, that means all the businesses have to be closed. Only essential services can operate. And that brings to the next thing that we are discussing today, the impact of closure of businesses and the recovery of it after we start to open up again, even though it's gradually. And now we are seeing a second wave, sort of. It's only to the northern part of Malaysia, but that do bring us back, whether we are really free of this COVID or the new one comes with a super spreader virus that could affect us if we are not careful. So are we ready to open back the economy? But if we do not open it, a lot of people are going to suffer. And during the crisis, of course, we do what we need to do. Essential services have to go on. Cleaning services have to go on. But who do we look out for? The most affected people that we worry about are those in the lower income category. So we did provide basic services, foods, things that they need, and go out through the collaboration of NGOs, government agencies to look out for them first. Once these are taken care of, the rest are about managing the crisis itself. With the movement control order, things are policed, even the army are around to control people from crossing borders. And the new standard operating procedures that have to be followed by those within the industries that are allowed to operate. How difficult that is, while understanding that people need to interact, but at the same time understanding that the social distancing needs to be done. And there are groups of people that still needs to go out and do the normal things, but having to follow the new standard operating procedures. Even until now, we have to measure temperature, we have to ensure the wearing of masks, and even in Malaysia, we are taking a strict measure by fining people who do not wear masks in public. It's 1,000 ringgit, which is a high fine. But that is what the government believes that needs to be done in order to curb the infection. Coming back to the economic impact, the first thing that we at the local government feel is that the revenue that I used to get for the past few years is now at least 20% lower than at the same time last year. So with this impending reduction in revenue, what are we going to do next? As far as resilience, financial resilience of a city, ever since I took office, at that time, our reserves are very low. So the first thing that I do, I look into the operational expenses that can be made leaner, which means savings, which is not liked by the staff, but needs to be done in order to increase my reserve, because I didn't know what's going to happen in 2020. In 2018, my resolve was to make enough reserve so that we can survive if anything happened for the next 6 months. So by 2020, I actually do have a 5 months reserve. So that will cover for my problem of reduction in income. But other than that, we still have to look into what needs to be prioritized, because we have a list of infrastructure investment that needs to be done, that we have promised to the people. What happened to that promises now? It needs to be re-looked into, it needs to be reprioritized, and we have not yet decided whether to launch a bond or borrow money, because doing what can be done within this few months before the year end meant that we can still support with whatever money that we have, but we cannot achieve 100% of the target that we have put in earlier in the year. So that is as far as the infrastructure investment is concerned. Secondly, the impact to the people, we realized that during the movement control order that things need to be mobilized through these online businesses, because that's the only operating medium that we have. And what are the long-term effect of this? Suppose that this effect will go on until next year. What if students don't go to school anymore? College students don't go back to college. Then we would have to rethink about the student housing. If that is the demand are not there, it will affect the businesses that comes along with having students around the area. Take for example, there is this bubble tea craze among the student areas in Subang Jaya. We have about 30 plus shops, new shops that opens this business because of the demand from the students. But now we see it closing one after another. So if the trend goes in a much longer period of time, the demand for housing will change, the type of businesses will change, the manner businesses are done will change, and this will need a higher level relook into how city planning is done, how mobility is done, and whether we have enough digital infrastructure and information to cater for people that may not have that facilities. How about those further out in the rural area? How about those that cannot afford the Wi-Fi and the system that they need to, because all businesses are done online? So that brings us to the lower income group. There are demands for more marketplace, but physically we can't provide it. And the city attempt to do bazaar online, creating new businesses, creating platforms, given new guidelines to home-based businesses, guiding the people on how to apply permit for businesses online, but that takes care only the bottom 20%. How about the bigger businesses that employs more people within the city? If we do not allow them to operate the business, that means a lot of unemployment will happen. But to operate the business in the new standard, can we do it as efficiently as before? And with a new global demand change, we are looking more into Asia Pacific market compared to the Europe and American market. So what are the demand from this area, and what are the production that we can increase in the city to send to the Asia Pacific market rather than to the European and American market. And since Subang Jaya is a city of more of the service sector rather than manufacturing sector, again, the impact on education, the way education is done, will have an impact on the rest of the economy, the demand for housing again, and the type of businesses that will be required to cater for that kind of services. So COVID also have taught us that delivery of foods should not be taken for granted, because we used to import a lot of food from around from the neighboring region, but during the early COVID months, we cannot have the transportation of the food item being delivered in time. That posed the questions of whether we can survive within the city itself through urban farming, which I think is far beyond what the city needs. It can only cater maybe for a very small percentage, but what are we going to do about that? The food supply. Now that it has opened up, we have learned that we can bypass the middleman and delivering the food directly to the people and contacting the supplier direct, but opening up a place, a distribution center that the people can, the residents can buy them directly. So this is another supply chain changes that happens after COVID. Another sector that is affected, I believe, is the daily wage earner, especially among women and those who are in a marginalized group. We also have to relook into the policy of foreign workers and migration, because when activities becomes, when resources are limited and activities are subjected to stringent standard operating procedures, we see that we cannot be dependent on foreign workers anymore. There is a policy now that foreign workers cannot even be assistant in the informal sectors. So what do? We are so dependent on them before. What do we do now? For the bigger economy sector, maybe they can go into capital intensive automation way of doing business. But for the small businesses, it means doing it yourself without the help of cheap foreign labors, and having to deliver it, having to market it. It's a new demand for how to do business itself. So as a city, how do we help this group of people? So I believe I have touched quite a number of subjects here that the city is experiencing, that maybe for the short term, we have done all that we can, but for the long term, if all of these changes happen, we need a new policy on city planning itself. We need a new policy for the digital gap that is happening between urban and rural area. We need to rethink about mobility. We need to rethink about financing all the infrastructure that needs to be done. Maybe before it was on physical infrastructure, but this time the emphasis needs to be on digital infrastructure. There are quite a number of changes that needs to be done by the city if COVID goes on for a lot longer, and how to recover in a best manner so that it is still sustainable in the future. And if everybody is still looking into green recovery, how can we do that with the limited resources? Katja, I have to stop for now to allow for other people to have their shares. So thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much, Mayor. Thanks for sharing the local flavor from your city, but also I think some of the practices that can be implemented. I think in Europe, the weather is not so sustainable to have the food production throughout the year, but I think it's something to really reconsider as well. I would like to move to Ukraine, to Mikhail Fateyev, who is the deputy mayor of the city of Kharkiv. And he's also the director of the Department of Economics and Communal Property, and also a member of the Executive Council in the city. Mikhail, are you available? I would also...
Да, я на связи. Добрый день.
Yes, the presentation will be in Russian, and I encourage again everyone who has not done so to change their translation or interpretation channel into English. Добрый день, Mikhail.
Добрый день. Все уже учились и понимают меня. Во-первых, я хотел бы поблагодарить вас за возможность принять участие в этом важном семинаре. Я представляю город Харьков. Харьков – это административный, экономический и культурный центр Харьковской области. Площадь территории города составляет 350 квадратных километров. Численность населения города составляет в настоящее время 1 миллион 439 тысяч 900 человек. Промышленный потенциал Харькова состоит из предприятий практически всех отраслей. Наиболее существенное влияние на результаты работы промышленности города имеют предприятия машиностроительной и пищевой отраслей. Хорошо развиты электроэнергетическая, топливная, химическая и строительная отрасли. Город является одним из 10 крупнейших студенческих центров Европы, ведущим научно-исследовательским центром Украины, основным экспортером высокотехнологичных товаров и услуг в области инжиниринга, офшорного программирования и IT-аутсортинга в Украине. Научный потенциал города представлен научно-исследовательскими проектами, институтами, конструкторскими бюро. В Харькове также действует Северо-Восточный научный центр Национальной академии наук Украины и Министерства образования и науки Украины. Исследования харьковских ученых в области физики твердого тела, криобиологии, криомедицины, радиоэлектроники, производства кристаллов, физики низких температур, генетики, селекции известны во всем мире. Теперь, что касается пандемии. По состоянию на 11 августа количество заболевших в городе составляет 3901 человек, выздоровевших 1890, умерших 102 человека. В связи с принятием карантинных мер в городе действуют следующие правила. Первое, естественно, это ношение масок в общественных местах, проведение массовых мероприятий не более одного человека на 5 квадратных метров, заполненность залов в кинотеатрах и театрах не более 50%, перевозки пассажиров в общественном транспорте по количеству мест для сидения. При этом городом принято решение изменить график работы предприятий и организаций в городе с тем, чтобы рассредоточить их по времени и, соответственно, снизить пиковые нагрузки на городской пассажирский транспорт. Карантинные меры, временное закрытие предприятий города, к сожалению, лишили многих людей возможности работать. И результатом ограничительных мер стал рост безработицы. Уровень зарегистрированной безработицы в Харькове вырос почти в 3 раза. Вот за первое полугодие количество безработных увеличилось с 4,5 тысячи до 13,5 тысячи. При этом в Харькове всегда был очень низкий уровень безработицы, порядка 0,5%. На сегодняшний день он вырос почти до 1,5%. Он, в общем-то, кажется низким, но для Харькова мы считаем это достаточно большой уровень, все-таки рост все-таки в 3 раза. Вот, как и говорила коллега, предыдущий уровень бюджетных поступлений снизился в городе Харькова примерно на те же проценты, 15,7% по городу Харькова. При этом еще задолго до карантина, 2020 год, в Харькове был объявлен годом медицины. И большое внимание уделяется оснащению городских медицинских учреждений. Конечно, в Харькове есть проблема нехватки врачей, в том числе анестезиологов, других специалистов, но работа ведется по решению этих проблем. В городе созданы мобильные бригады, которые занимаются забором биологического материала для тестирования на коронавирусную инфекцию. Из бюджета города выделены достаточно большие по меркам Украины средства для выплаты доплат медицинским работникам, которые работают с ковидными пациентами. И выделены средства из резервного фонда на цели борьбы с инфекциями, вызванной COVID-19. За счет этих средств осуществляется закупка аппаратов искусственной вентиляции легких, санитарных автомобилей, костюмов биозащиты, респираторов, необходимых препаратов. Первоначально в период дефицита защитных масок было закуплено городом 2 миллиона защитных масок, из которых 1,5 миллиона роздано харьковчанам через учреждения образования и другие организации бесплатно. Харьковчанам, требующим социальной поддержки, малообеспеченным гражданам, выдавались продуктовые наборы, особенно людям, которые пожилого возраста, которым трудно было и нельзя было выходить на улицу. Для стабилизации на рынке труда проведен комплекс мероприятий по сохранению рабочих мест. Оказывается помощь работодателям по частичной безработице. И суммы выплаченной денежной помощи тоже составляют 23 миллиона гривен. Это большие по украинским меркам деньги. В мае 2020 года в Харькове открыт первый в Украине центр поддержки представителей малого и среднего бизнеса, который пока работает в тестовом режиме. На сайте предпринимательства, потребительский рынок создан отдельный раздел с информацией для бизнеса по поведению во время карантина. Также введен упрощенный порядок регистрации в центре занятости. При этом, несмотря на снижение деловой активности в первом полугодии 2020 года, Харьковский городской совет не приостановил реализацию ни одной из городских целевых программ, направленных на развитие экономики, социальной сферы и городской инфраструктуры. Таких программ у нас работает более 50. С целью стимулирования развития малого и среднего бизнеса по поручению городского головы идет разработка программы компенсации по кредитам малого и среднего бизнеса, что должно уменьшить долговую нагрузку предприятий, прежде всего малого бизнеса, поддержать и стимулировать их развитие. Кроме того, в городе продолжают работать программа строительства приобретения доступного жилья, которое могут использовать врачи, педагоги, другие представители бюджетных учреждений. Это стимулирует и инвестирование в жилищное строительство. Готовится масштабный проект на базе Экополиса ХТЗ, ведется создание будущего всеукраинского центра вирусологии в Харькове. Осуществлено приобретение первой партии оборудования для экспертного лабораторно-диагностического центра инфекционных болезней и санитарной защиты. Кроме того, городским головой принято решение о создании коммунальной лаборатории для проведения тестов всех видов, в том числе на выявление COVID-19. В целом, ситуацию угрожающей назвать не могу, но она требует комплексной работы, в том числе и с учетом опыта других городов, что дает возможность сегодняшняя конференция, я думаю, и другие мероприятия, которые будут проводиться. Поэтому спасибо за внимание. Мы готовы ответить на любые вопросы и участвовать в программах, которые сегодня крайне необходимы, прежде всего, жителям нашего города. Спасибо.
Спасибо большое, Mikhail. Thank you very much. And thanks for sharing also the experience of focusing actually on the most vulnerable groups like the elderly, which I think it's a large segment of your population. And I would like to, in fact, now move to the city of Vienna. If Omar Al-Rawi is available, he is a member of the Vienna City Council and also a member of the Committee on Urban Development, Housing and European International Affairs. Omar, are you available?
Yes, I am available.
Thank you very much.
Hello? Are you
All
hearing
right.
me or not?
Yes, we are hearing you and we can see your presentation. Over to you.
Okay. Yes. How is the possibility when the presentation will be forwarded? So good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here today on behalf of the mayor of Vienna, Michael Ludwig, who sends his warm regards and sympathy to all of you. Let's go to the slide number 1, if it's possible, the profile. Yes, that's the one. Vienna, I will try to be brief, and maybe then we can share some of the interesting details in it. But Vienna, as most of you will hopefully know, is a growing city with a population of 1.9 million inhabitants. We're lucky that we have not been hit too hardly by the pandemic, though we have nearer countries like Italy, which affected Austria a lot. However, I am here today to speak about our strategy for a resilient, sustainable, and inclusive recovery. And let's be just brief to the description of the crisis in the city. One can say that we were well prepared in Vienna to cope with both the health and the socio-economic crises due to the economic pandemic. We are convinced that part of the explanation is that we have a very strong public sector, including health and social services. You know, Vienna has about 30 hospitals and a very high health services in the city, and we have a very good functioning public utilities companies who did a great job to maintain quality and continuity. For us, it was not only important to do things, but also to set up a constant information and communication with our citizens in order to keep everyone informed. Still, although the numbers are not that bad, mortality was low, our economy is, but unfortunately hit severely by this crisis. Take the next slide, please, the economic and financial impact. How is the slide going to change? So clearly we are expecting a severe recession. And the main sectors of concern are tourism. You know, Vienna is one of the most important sites for tourism, and Congress tourism. We will have a main problem with the culture and the retail. However, we are in a good financial position and can take countermeasures with our services and can take countermeasures with our reserves that we have. As of today, we have invested about 150 million euros in acute measures and long-term recovery. The slight crisis response from a strategic and governance perspective, I would like to highlight that our mayor commissioned the Vienna Economic Council early stage post-corona scenarios and to implement support measures for the economy and the labor market. Perhaps the investment company we set up to say Vienna business is interesting to you. We had a few inquiries from other cities, whereby the city of Vienna was breaking new ground by setting up an organization with the goal of temporarily acquiring stakes in companies whose existence is threatened by the corona crisis. Many of our activities are also related to climate protection, as more bike lanes, more space for pedestrians and others. And maybe let me highlight some measures that we undertook. For example, at the early beginning of the crisis, the city Vienna Council and the mayor, for example, issued taxi vouchers for the elderly people, the vulnerable people who were, for example, affected by the crisis. So it was a double investment to help these people keeping at home, avoiding public transportation, maybe making their retail by giving the taxis the chance to deliver these things. And on the other side, the taxi economy had a possibility to overcome the first days. Also the gastronomy vouchers. Every household in Vienna got a voucher with 50 euros for many people household and 25 euros for one person households. And these vouchers were possible to enforce the gastronomy and the restaurants, and on the other side, helping the people trying to regain some normal life again after the things. Production of protective masks in Vienna. And I think one of the most interesting things is also making the initiative to help companies to try to implement home offices and invest in the digitalization of the city to help them go through this crisis. And on the slide, mid to long-term economic recovery, this is the last slide I have. Let me close by mentioning our Vienna 2030 strategy, which is our long-term development plan until 2050, which has already set the right priorities before the Corona crisis, is clearly implementing the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Our priorities are well chosen as well, as they will not only contribute to well-being for all, but also to an inclusive and sustainable recovery. An example is the field of housing, which Vienna is very famous for it. So as in Vienna, the crisis has shown that a big share of social, affordable, protected, and quality housing is key to protect people not only in the health crisis, but also in social and economic crisis. And that's why, for example, during this crisis, we issued also a decision that people who couldn't pay the rent for their houses, that we postponed any possibility of getting them out of their houses. And if, as you maybe know, that in Vienna, about 61% of all the Viennese lives either in a household that belongs to the city of Vienna or is subsidized by the city of Vienna, and about 15% lives in a household that belongs to the community, to the city of Vienna. So these were briefly the measures that I would like to share with you, and I would be looking forward for any detailed questions that you might have for us. Thank you for inviting us and sharing our experience with you.
Thank you, Omar, for sharing the Viennese experience and and highlighting, in fact, how having a strong vision and already, strong assumptions on different development trends in the city is very important, and also the link, in fact, to this sustainable development goals that in fact cover many of the elements of already, and then linking that up, of course, in the long-term strategic response and recovery aspects of the city. We have also another presentation, the final presentation for this city exchange, which will be the city of Bishkek. The presentation again will be held in Russian language. Merim Kudrylieva will speak about this experience. She is the chief specialist and also the International Cooperation and Protocol Department colleague from the city of Bishkek. Merim, are you available?
We have some information. Hello,
okay,
everyone. I'm not Merim. My name is Fiscal. Yes.
Bikul, welcome as well. Thank you very much.
Yes, you're welcome. Thank you. And I will, first of all, I want to thank organizers of the forum and to wish all the all participants success. So I'm representing Bishkek city administration, and I want to share our case with you. And so let me start. As you, sorry. Как здесь это, да? Sorry, I have some technical issues. So I don't want to burden you with numbers, and let me talk about the measures taken by the city administration. Unfortunately, the virus has not spared our capital, and of course, the virus affected the vitality of the city and our economy. Not only city, but also the whole country. And because of restrictive measures, of course, as many other cities, business suffers. City tax revenue shortfall arises, budget issues, and etc. So, therefore, the leadership of our city has created city headquarters to minimize the negative consequences from external factors associated with the coronavirus infection. So, yes, thank you. Of course, first priority of Bishkek city is to solve urgently health system problems and maintain at least some kind of economic stability. As the business suffers, we have unfortunately many many unemployed people. So as you can see here, numbers they are very high. So, and elevating non-employment, addressing vulnerabilities and building resilience require multi-dimensional integrated approaches. A resolution of Bishkek City Kinesh, Bishkek City Parliament, was adopted in amending the approved budget of the city of Bishkek for 2020, which optimized the revenue and expenditure parts of the budget by about 300 million soms. It's approximately almost $4 million US. It taking into account the significant loss of the income and in order to finance projected expenditures and mandatory payments, the mayor's office of Bishkek by the end of the year was forced to reduce a number of expenses for the acquisition of fixed assets, as well as the cost of holding cultural and other events. Draft action plan was the mayor's office in Bishkek for 2020 was developed to restore economic activity and support the activities of business entities, which covers aspects of the economy, budget, and preservation of creation of jobs. A number of structural dimensions are involved in the implementation of the plan. So, as many other countries and cities, it's clear that getting back to a normal life will not be easy. But I hope that we all together, we overcome these barriers, and we hope we will continue our cooperation with the cities, with the international organizations, and with your help, we will overcome these barriers, as I said. And so that's my short, briefly presentation. I wish you all the good luck, and I hope we will get back as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Bikul, for sharing your experience. In fact, there is great interest by the participants to have your contact details. So I think our team will make those available, and also the same for the later panel discussion. And then definitely we will be in continuous contact to support. I would like to ask my colleagues again, in fact, following this presentations of cities, to use this wonderful Mentimeter tool again to look at different questions that came up from the city presentations. Over to you, Anna.
Hello, so this will be our last interactive session before we move on to the panel dialogue. And thinking back on what we have learned from the cities and from our previous speakers, we would like us again to ask some questions. And first one would be, okay, here. Okay, there we go. Who have been the most effective actors in your city in addressing impacts of the crisis? Again, you can access this through menti.com using the code 90084. Right, so it seems like actually there's a good distribution among the different sectors. Great, thank you for voting. Next, in which area do you think your city should focus their economic recovery measures on? So again, some keywords. Oops. Sorry. So similar to earlier, we have employment as a main focus area. Environment is also coming up. Mobility, climate, sustainability, biodiversity, informal economy. Great. I think I accidentally made the voting too long. So let's close this in 7, 6, 3, 2, 1. Okay, thank you so much for your answers. And finally, do you feel like your city's current actions are gearing towards resilient economic recovery? Right, so we are more or less stuck again in the slightly lower end of the spectrum, meaning that there is still a lot of space for cities to move towards resilience, especially in terms of this crisis. Thank you so much. And that is our last question before we move on to perhaps questions for the speakers. If we have time for this, Katya? Hello?
There is a question addressed to me, to Omar Rawi of the city of Vienna.
Yes, thank you.
Hello?
Omar?
Yes. So, do you hear me? Hello?
Yes,
We can hear you.
Yeah. There was a was a question about the vouchers for the gastronomy, and he was asking about implementing the way of food. Of course, there was also an initiative during the crisis. The city of Vienna started to implement slow food action, trying to implement and to support the city and provide it by the local farmers within the border of the city of Vienna. And there was also a platform where even the elderly, vulnerable people, or everyone during the lockdown could just make a delivery, and it was delivered by the city of Vienna. So it was, of course, this is a thing that we started as an initiative within the kindergartens, the hospitals, all facilities of the city of Vienna, by providing the food and the vegetables, all by the around the city of Vienna, and trying to support them. And this is one of the facts that we desire and see ourselves as a resilient city, that we could, on all this crisis, had enough energy, enough water supplement, a very good health care, but also the food supplement of the city was possible. So it was a good proof to see. All the time you talk about resilient city and how resilient is your city, but we saw that we were resilient economically, we were resilient on the environmental measures, and we were also on the social issue very resilient. So nobody stood back, though we have really a severe recession problems in the city of Vienna.
Thank you, Omar. Maybe one more question, Anna? Do you like to prioritize one of them, or otherwise I would in fact kindly ask all the city speakers to put on their camera. My colleagues would like to take a screenshot because we cannot do a photograph on the podium of our virtual platform, but if you could kindly please switch on your videos. I guess it's a historic moment that needs to be documented.
But I don't know why my camera is not functioning. You are not seeing me, I think. I don't know why.
We cannot see you.
Yeah, they said the administrator deactivated the video. It's not me. The host deactivated you.
So then I think, Amaya, we will have to find another way to keep the memory in place. And if you don't mind, then I would like to invite Brian Evans, who's the Chief Urbanist of the City of Glasgow, to take over the facilitation of the panel dialogue, which looks at regional perspectives. We have our colleagues from the Economic Commissions here, as well as the City of Tirana. So Brian, over to you, and kindly let me know if you need any assistance.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me, Katja?
We can hear you very well.
Thank you very much.
And we can also see you.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much indeed for inviting me to participate today. In fact, I was reminded in microcosm, Katja, of urban resilience today. The timing of the event is such that it started a little early for us here in the United Kingdom. I mean, not too early, but that's no problem. I thought I'll simply get up, get everything organized. But we had a thunderstorm last night. Nothing too serious in global terms. One of these unusual events that is happening so much these days. And we had a month's rain overnight and a lot of thunderstorm. And in the process, this appears to have knocked out quite a lot of the internet provision in Scotland. So I've managed to hook up using 3G. And if the video hasn't broken up yet, then that's quite a testament to old-fashioned technologies, 2Gs behind the current 5G. So we have, three very interesting panel reflections today from two of the regional commissions. I think before Ms. Roll speaks, we will also hear from Tirana. In a little while, we will hear from Mr. Sadiq from ESCAP and Ms. Roll from UNECE. But first of all, we're going to hear from Mr. Atsui Kurosawa, Regional Director at UN Habitat. And I wonder if I might use my privilege as moderator to ask each of you, if you have a moment, the questions are set out, of course, on the agenda, but if you have a moment to reflect on the relationship, if you think there is one, between COVID-19 and climate change and the climate emergency, and whether or not one is affecting the activity of the other. Anyway, Mr. Kurosawa, would you like to speak to us and give us your reflections, please? Thank you. Are you here?
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me to this very important global workshop, and to my colleagues and to all the participants. And it is my great pleasure to meet you all online, although I prefer visiting your cities and meeting you in person. I work in a regional office for Asia Pacific, which covers about 40 countries in this region. And I just prepared some PowerPoints for my intervention. Some of my points may have been already addressed by previous speakers, but if so, it proves I'm on the right track. So let me start doing this presentation. Are you seeing my presentation?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let me move on. Okay, so let me start saying, Asia Pacific region is very diverse region. And in terms of urbanization, this region account for about 54% of world urban population. And the most populous countries in the world are, many of them are in this region. China, India, Indonesia, Pakistan, Bangladesh. So 8 out of 10 are in this region. And also many companies, particularly global companies, Fortune Global 500 companies, have head offices in region, most compared to other regions. Living in Japan, I have been closely watching how COVID-19 has been spreading from China to neighboring countries like Korea, Japan, Thailand, and afterwards to the rest of the world. And now the region, East Asia and Southeast Asia are the first hit by COVID-19, but there are many of them have managed to cope with this COVID-19 relatively well, while South and Southwest Asia, many of them are now seen as a new epicenters or hotspot. So this shows quite a contrast between sub-regions in Asia Pacific region. As a UN Habitat staff, it is probably my duty to show these two recent documents published by Secretary General. One is COVID-19 in urban world, which was prepared by UN Habitat. And the other one is the impact of COVID-19 on Southeast Asia, which was prepared by ESCAP, of course, together with many other partners. So let me just brief you on some of the observations and analysis in those documents. But Omar, my colleague from ESCAP, may talk about Southeast Asia. So because of time, also let me skip some of the slides which I prepared on part of Southeast Asia. So let me just move on to the. So from shedding light from through urban lens, the paper on COVID-19 in urban world highlighted the following. First, widening inequalities are having different spatial impact. Particularly, it touches on the world 1 billion slum dwellers, those in slums, favelas, and informal settlements. Also, it also touches on the kind of poor neighborhoods, derived, urban areas in the developing world, such as London and New York, and the infection rates in those neighborhoods are higher compared to more affluent ones. And also, it highlighted households, schools, and neighborhoods in deprived urban areas are not able to access remote education. We are talking about, work from home and telecommuting, but many of them are, of course, do not have access to remote education, telemedicine, and teleworking. Also, the paper highlighted the critical role of local governments as frontline responders. Also, it stressed that COVID-19 has substantially reduced local and subnational governments' revenues and constrained budget, as some of previous speakers already addressed. The paper called for action across different policy areas. In particular, it stressed three areas, the following. Number one, tackle inequalities and long-term development deficit. Number two, strengthen capacity of local government to avoid services disruption and steer sustainable development. And number three, innovative measures for resilient, inclusive, gender equal, and green economic recovery. That's a very, brief snapshot of those two most recent documents issued by the Secretary General in New York. Let me add my personal, reflection and some experiences in my country. I'm working in my home country, Japan, highlighting three keywords. While we are still witnessing resurgence and second waves, and the risks of coronavirus will stay with us for a while until effective remedies and vaccines are developed and distributed widely. Economic recovery is a key, and many countries are struggling how to balance response to health crisis and economic recovery. And I'd like to share my thought on how, what are the way forward. First, we have to keep our clear focus on local economies. Not needless to mention, national economies consist of many local economies with different sizes and with different comparative advantages. So how to restore economy is a key, and economic stimulus packages need to focus on local MSMEs. Local governments and financial institutions play critical roles for that. That's one. So local is the first keyword I like to highlight. Second one, opportunities. Many people mention, we should convert challenges into opportunities. And I'm not the person to advocate such a very vague concept, but there are certainly opportunities which we should explore. Let me share some of the new development nearby or in my country. Some industries and businesses, individuals are performing relatively well despite this very challenging environment. And we have seen, witnessing, ESG or green or social bond funds are expanding. And there are also many cases which are quite successful in terms of the crowdfunding. And one of my favorite story is the hotel, a local hotel in southern part of Japan, which was hit by two disasters, consecutive disasters. One is coronavirus, but secondly, natural disaster, flooding. So the flooding totally damaged their building, the hotel. And so they decided to go on crowdfunding, and they have managed to raise quite, good amount of funding or money from different sources. And also another example I have observed is house builders in Japan, which has a clear focus or target on middle-income families. Because due to the coronavirus, people's preference are moving from big high-rise condominiums in the city centers to detached or semi-detached houses in suburbs. And this several companies who are targeting those groups are selling very well. Last example I like to mention is workations. I don't know whether this word makes sense to all of you. It's a mixture of work and vacation. And one island city or town nearby my town, Fukuoka, about one hour from Fukuoka, is now, the town used to attract many visitors and tourists from within Japan and outside Japan. But now they don't have many visitors. So they have developed a policy to use their space and facilities to accommodate the companies and individuals who want to have a different environment, different from those in big cities. So they are attracting companies and individuals who want to stay in a short stay or longer stay in the island and work in a different environment, and particularly creative people are prefer that kind of environment. Last point I like to stress is, of course, leave no one behind, but also from spatial or territorial perspectives, the habitat often say, leave no place behind. Amid growing inequalities in terms of not only incomes, but also job opportunities, education, learning, and many other opportunities. Before closing my intervention, let me just walk you through some of the activities we are implementing in this region. Philippines, and there are some example from many, Myanmar and Fiji. While those are the project we are implementing, and we usually work very closely with communities. So enhancing or empowering communities to prepare and respond to and recover from this COVID-19 crisis. And that's it from my side. And thank you for listening. And I'm over. Thank you.
Brian, you are muted. You may wish to unmute yourself.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry about that. Yes, I was just thanking you and thanking you for the reminding us of the UN Habitat phrase, leave no one, no place behind, because sometimes the no place is forgotten in political discussions and dialogue. So now I think we will hear from Omar Siddiq from UNESCAP also. Are you there, Omar? Good morning, good afternoon, welcome.
Good afternoon from Bangkok. Can you hear me and see my screen? Okay, wonderful. The technology is working. Well, it's really a privilege to be here today with all of you. Thank you for joining us and for contributing to such rich discussions. My name is Omar Sadiq. I'm an Economic Affairs Officer in the Sustainable Urban Development team of UN ESCAP. I have about 15 years experience working on urban planning and management within the UN system. And I joined UN ESCAP about 3 years ago from the Cities Alliance Secretariat, where I was also managing some of our slum upgrading programs in West Africa, recovering from the Ebola virus disease. So there's some really interesting parallels that I hope that we can also draw from other communicable disease responses in cities. My presentation essentially has two parts. The first part, I will zoom out a little bit to the macroeconomic picture in Asia Pacific with respect to COVID-19. I think this is really critical because what cities are really feeling the brunt of these larger socioeconomic trends in our region and globally. And then I'll look particularly at impacts on municipal finance, local government, fiscal situation, and give some policy recommendations based on our existing work with member states and cities. COVID-19 in Asia Pacific, we have 4 main control measures in place that we are all living on a daily basis. 1, quarantine and social distancing, travel restrictions, extensive lockdown preventing most economic activities, and finally, border closure and limited trading of essential goods, which is leading to massive disruption of supply chains. Excuse me. In terms of the immediate shocks that this has had, we see a decrease in aggregate demand overall in the economy, major impacts on service sectors, tourism, retail, hospitality, and civil aviation, but also sectors that rely heavily on supply chains, pharmaceuticals, automobiles, electronics, and renewables. Particularly renewables, many of the supply chains for renewable energy that are really vital for decarbonization of our city economies originate in China, and they have been severely disrupted because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Crude oil prices have also plummeted. This has led, for example, to the price of virgin plastics to be, for the first time, cheaper than recyclable plastics. And on top of that, the huge production of PPE and other single-use plastics, which are overwhelming, for example, municipal solid waste management systems. In the medium to long term, a possible recession or a major deceleration of GDP growth. Please note that this analysis is for the region, which is quite diverse. ESCAP, as my colleague Kurt mentioned, we cover a region of over 54 member states from Turkey to Tonga. So the diversity also lends some inferences when you look at sub-regional and national scale. Price increases, at least temporarily, for daily essentials and medicinal products. Increased unemployment. I think this has been a common theme that we've heard from the participants. In service sectors, labor-intensive manufacturing is often hit the hardest, small, medium enterprise sector and informal economy highly impacted. And overall, we see a decrease in government-related revenues. As a result of this, we see an expected increase both in national and urban poverty and inequality in our region. But essentially, we have a health challenge that has been put on top of an existing affordable housing crisis, an existing crisis in terms of inequalities, and lack of services. So we have longer term stresses that have been affected by this additional public health shock. What are some of those stresses? We have around 400 million people living on less than $1.9 US a day. 1 billion live on less than $3.2 US a day in our region. 1/3 of urban dwellers live in slums, about 29%. 1.6 billion lack sanitation, 260 million lack access to clean water, 60% of the population in our region lack social protection, and 70% on average are informal workers. 4 in 10 Asia Pacific residents have no access to healthcare. At the same time, we see massive reverse migration of low-skilled daily workers with and between cities due to COVID-19, particularly highlighting also the system of cities between supply chains between small towns, intermediate cities, and larger primate cities. Health inequities and inequalities are important to state. Because of COVID-19 and the absence of universal healthcare, many households have reverted to use of savings. Only a handful of developing countries in our region have universal healthcare. Bhutan, China, Maldives, Sri Lanka, and Thailand are some notable positive exceptions. Only 2% on average of GDP is spent on health in developing countries in our region, which is low compared to the global average of 4.7. Without unemployment benefits, many, in particular daily workers, have no means to afford adequate healthcare to address concerns. Vulnerable populations, of course, are most impacted. People living and working in informal settlements, in the informal economy, low-skilled migrants, people with disabilities, women, and the elderly in particular. SCAP's recommended regional response to these macro trends in the immediate term: increased fiscal spending at the local level. What does this mean? We look at subsidies for medical testing, treatment, and emergency response. Secondly, importantly for this discussion, fiscal measures to support labor, jobs, and living standards. All governments, local governments in our region, in terms of their COVID-19 recovery plans, are being asked a very simple question: from your investment, how many livelihoods will you support? Cash handouts to relieve the burden on urban poor households. Asia-Pacific region actually has a very rich history in terms of social protection measures. Many of the countries in our region have looked at food-based handouts, food for work schemes as well. However, we find that the cash handouts are a bit more elastic and can help support also some consumption smoothing in the immediate term. However, Asia-Pacific has ample fiscal space. In 2019, prior to the pandemic, average debt to GDP ratio was at 40%, and the average fiscal deficit was at 3%. So we also need to look at removing tariffs and unnecessary non-tariff measures on the import of essential medicines, medical equipment, and related inputs. Monetary easing to support financial liquidity of the banking sector, particularly reducing interest rates and delivering affordable loans to small, medium enterprise. And finally, in the immediate term, facilitate availability of key medicinal products, rationalizing, prioritizing healthcare sector, and in cooperation with private sector actors. Now let's switch a little bit from the macro regional picture and look at the economic impact on local government municipal finance that we're seeing. And of course, this is still quite a moving picture, but we are getting some very useful impacts. We all know that early action is critical to cities and local governments that can't afford lockdown, and where working from home is just structurally not an option for most people, especially those living in informal settlements. Generally, however, COVID-19 resources are managed by central government health ministries and do not reach the different local government units required for an integrated response. In addition to this, I would see quite the worrying trend of national urban ministries not being engaged fully in the national government response to COVID-19, which is a huge challenge in our region. From Ebola and other pandemic experiences, we know that countries that neglected the role of local governments in the early response and suffered the consequences and publicly acknowledge how costly that neglect was. At the same time, we have different degrees of centralization and subsidiarity across the region. Potential limited power and resources to deliver response in emergencies and build local resilience and preparedness is affected because of that, and inefficiencies and slower service delivery during emergency responses. Let's now look in particular pillars of municipal finance and its impact on COVID-19. Intergovernmental fiscal transfers. We see a greater dependence on these transfers due to declining OSR, own source revenue collection, for both capital and operational expenditure, including for debt servicing. Depending on the severity of the lockdown measures that are in place, however, expenditure on many major development or capital projects are slowing down, meaning there may be immediate liquidity under those budget lines that can be reallocated for emergency purposes. Own source revenue collection completely drying up. Most impacted revenues are generated from sales or income taxes, cities collecting fees on services such as transit and parking, environmental services such as waste collection, particularly in cities with high-risk industries. We see that cities currently relying on property taxes will not experience an immediate impact, although long-term unemployment we do see will dampen the real estate demand and their value. In terms of debt capital, I think Mayor Noorani also mentioned a little bit about that. For those cities being able to access the market, which prospects are even lower due to their declining fiscal position, but those that are, the ability to service debt may be impacted for those cities due to the reduction of the own source revenue. And of course, the most fragile urban economic compositions, those in high employment and high risk industries such as mining, oil, retail, leisure and hospitality, transportation, travel services, employment services are the most vulnerable, as well as those cities with large informal economic bases. So what do we do about this? In terms of the immediate response, I think one of the key messages that we are seeing across cities of different sizes is coordinated local action and strong intergovernmental partnerships are really vital to helping us set our strong foundation to get out of this crisis and build back better. We need to ensure that national fiscal stimulus packages are complemented with measures specifically for state and local governments and for small, medium enterprises and households, and that conditions of these transfers are transparent and responsive to the needs affected. I don't think we're going to see this level of financing being put into the system for quite some time or ever. So it's really important that we are able to build these intergovernmental partnerships and ensure that there's appropriate devolution measures that are complemented with these COVID-19 national fiscal stimulus plans. In some regions, such as Southeast Asia, there are also regional COVID-19 stimulus plans that are being set up with the support of government of Thailand and others. I'll continue to going. In terms of the longer term, however, we see that policy measures and investments in cities that are grounded in the commitment to sustainability, in key economic infrastructure, that is growth-inducing infrastructure, and also infrastructure that can help decarbonize the economy, increase the transition to a circular economy, and build climate resilience, notably transport, energy, and telecommunication, will not only help fighting COVID-19, but also enable the region to pursue its sustainable development and address climate change. Putting the needs, of course, of the urban poor and informal workers at the center of recovery efforts and local economic diversification to build back better is really critical. In addition, also attracting initial capital projects that build a broader tax base. We have a huge issue in many developing Asia-Pacific countries where the tax base does not reflect the underlying economic market of the city. Yeah? We need the ability of local governments to exercise more authority, especially in times of crisis. And we need to measure urban preparedness for pandemics to evaluate gaps across urban systems. Scaling up PPPs and community schemes to transition to finance local solutions for building resilience is quite important. The region has had a mixed history in terms of PPPs. Generally, those that are more successful are those that can demonstrate very clear ROI, return on investment. So this is your classical power, ports, telecoms, parking lots. However, really vital public goods such as water and sanitation and hygiene, which help to reduce morbidity, but that at the same time have to have some recourse to public subsidy as well as user fees, have been subject to more contractual renegotiations in PPPs. And at the same time, really important vital aspects to greening the recovery, such as green spaces and public spaces, which need full recourse to financing, need to be included in local government financing plans and recovery plans more generally. Looking at digital technologies, Mayor Narani also mentioned looking at transitioning from hard infrastructure to digital infrastructure. This is quite important, although technology is no panacea, and it cannot replace basic trunk infrastructure that is required. Finally, I think one of the issues that we ran into with COVID-19 is the unhealthy relationship with nature, and which helped to contribute to such a zoonotic disease in an urban wet market in our region. And finally, we do not want in the recovery phase, as was done in the Asian financial crisis, to rebuild by building lots of coal power plants and lots of gray infrastructure. So we need to focus on nature-based solutions, blue-green, also in those urban infrastructure financing packages that also support co-benefits for people's livelihoods, environmental sustainability, and economic growth overall. This is a visual representation, but I'm done now. Just a quick word to say that some of the resources from SCAP are on your screen, including our information portal on COVID-19, where you can get up-to-date information on all policies, fiscal, monetary, SME, trade measures, transport, for example, on COVID-19. Thank you very much, and over to you, Brian.
Thank you very much, Omar. I'm so sorry to interrupt you there just at the end. I'm conscious, of course, that the colleagues have done an extremely good job running to time today, but we are hard up against the deadline, and we still have to hear from Ms. Roll and indeed from the city of Tirana. So I wonder, could I, without further ado, hand over to you, Gulnara, and also to our colleague from Tirana, and could I ask you, I'm so sorry, to try to be concise so that we can try to bring the programming on time at the end. Thank you very much. Who is speaking for Tirana?
Hello, Brian. It's Tracy Trebitska here for Tirana.
Hello, Tracy.
Can I have the floor or? Okay.
Yeah, please.
Okay, thank you very much for inviting Tirana to this project. It's really important to discuss and share what our practices and challenges have been so we can learn from each other. And today's presentations were really interesting. I'll try to keep it very short because my presentation format was like the panelist format, but I will try to focus more on what we're learning along the way and what is our vision for tomorrow. So I will share my screen. If you can tell me if you see my presentation.
We see something. Yeah, there is your presentation.
Okay.
It seems a lot of slides.
Sorry?
It seems like a lot of slides, Tracy. So
I will skip very briefly. Just a short presentation of Tirana and Albania. Tirana has a total number of population around 1 million, which is a third of the country, and provides over 40% of the country's GDP. So it's the main economic motor of the country. And the main sectors are services, trade, construction, and tourism. What we should know is that before COVID-19, Tirana was shaken by 2 major earthquakes, especially the second earthquake of November, which was 6.4 magnitude. And apart from damaged houses, dwellings, and apartments, it had also 51 fatalities in Durrës, Tumana, and Tirana, the region which was mostly affected. So COVID-19 found us already in a state of natural disaster and emergency, and all our resources, economic and human resources, were allocated to help cope with the earthquake reconstruction, which would need 1 billion euros to reconstruct. This is what is needed. This is the timeline of the crisis in the city, but I can skip it because it's kind of the similar as everyone else. Maybe we have less fatalities than in Europe, but still the crisis is unfolding. So we still have increased numbers of people who have been affected and increased number of deaths. The main economic and financial impacts, these are some figures I could find in a short time. The national employment rate decreased by 1.3% as job offer decreased. And as you can see, we had until May 222 business activities unregistered. And revenue collection in the municipality, as in all other cities, has shrunk. This is an estimated 14% compared to the same quarter of 2019. We are now undergoing a study to see what the COVID-19 impacts have been on municipalities' finances and provision of services, and have some scenario analyzed of what could happen and have further recommendations. So this will be finished by the end of August, beginning of September. So I think this will help us also on the other phases of these projects. The immediate response, as everyone else, have been budget reallocations and emergency fund deployment. Of course, safety measures in local markets for distancing, and public institutions require masks and disinfection entrances. We supported the social population most at risk, especially the elderly and poorer communities. Another focus of our crisis response has been to ensure, since transport was stopped because of, apart from the medical staff, which it was essential for them. We tried to use this opportunity to enlarge sidewalks and create pop-up bike lanes and push towards sustainable mobility, which is one of the main priorities of the municipality of Tirana. And COVID-19 presented a good opportunity to have this shift because, for example, transport in Tirana is one of the main issues of air quality and greenhouse gas emissions, and everything is interconnected. And of course, if you have a city that doesn't have much clean air, it doesn't help also with COVID-19 symptoms. Well, one of the remaining challenges is that we are dependent still from the central government, and we need to have a better coordination for the local response, because we do not have a proper crisis management and resilience action plan, because until now we have been using our climate action plans in a way to have preventative measures for future disasters, but then early earthquake and COVID-19 found us unprepared. So we are now working to start with the crisis and resilience action plan. These are some examples of our local response and recovery measures. I'm going to focus maybe on the fiscal packages, which you can see we also had delayed payment of taxes or reducing fees and taxes for businesses and families for short periods. Some initiatives which could be mentioned are the initiative Adopt a Grandparent, where we helped over 24,000 families with donation of food packages and medicines through our volunteers that registered to help their local community, but also through food donations and packages from businesses and CSOs. We have tried to adapt our available public spaces for classrooms for open students, or to do well, this after especially the lockdown where we were still uncertain. We tried to use the parks and public spaces to do the physical activity and yoga, for example, for the elderly or vulnerable communities like kids with disadvantage who needed also mental health support, not only physical support. And one of our strategies was to foster tourism and economy revival campaign by asking citizens to travel to Tirana, travel Albania, and consume Albanian, so to help the sectors that have been affected the most, like tourism, restoration, bars and cafes, etc. So because Tirana, this is one of the main economic sectors of Tirana, and they have suffered a lot. One thing that it might be good to explain about how Tirana has been thinking and processing this is that we found ourselves in the midst of learning from learning by doing, because we have been implemented several plans like the General Local Plan Tirana 2030, the Green City Action Plan, adopted in 2018. We're currently doing Sustainable Urban Mobility Plan to finish within 2020, adapting our strategies and our plans to the COVID-19 situation. But what we found is that we were in a way kind of already going for the green recovery part. Maybe we didn't think of it as a green recovery, but we should plan more sustainably for the future and for climate change, because climate change was our main focus. But now with the COVID-19, with the pandemic, and also with the earthquake, we're trying to mix it all together to see how we can do well for the future. So without much details, I would like to focus on what are our lessons or our objectives for the future to have a greener recovery. So I'm going to present 4 of our main projects. Is Urban Regeneration Project, which is the Tirana Riverside Project, 29 hectare of green neighborhood, which will be one of the northern poles.
Perhaps if you could just give the headlines for each of the projects. Would that be possible?
Sure.
Rather than?
So I'm just going to skip.
Sorry to
Vienna
press.
Riverside project is on the northern pole. And it will accommodate the also residents from the earthquake that were left homeless. The Northern Boulevard, which also connects with the Tirana Riverside project, these are again part of the green recovery for to have green infrastructure and green neighborhoods that respect distances and have better use of green spaces. The Combinat development pole, this area was most affected by the earthquake and has the most damaged houses. So also the plan for this pole is to have a more sustainable, green and smart neighborhood with energy efficiency measures. And then this is perhaps the most important project that we are currently under development is the orbital forest, which will be a virtual wall of 2 million trees that will end urban sprawl, improve microclimates, air quality and biodiversity, and it has been designed by Stefano Boeri in our general local plan Tirana 2030. And is maybe the most ambitious project we have, so we could improve not only the quality of environment and biodiversity, climate and resilience to extreme weather events, but at the same time a study is being implemented to create economic sense out of this and social economic development in the areas that the orbital forest will be developed. So with this, I don't know, I hope I didn't take much time. I just want to finish with this quote, that nature can live without us, but we cannot live without nature. And then climate change, COVID, biodiversity loss are all connected together. And if the future is not green, then I don't think there's a future at all. So thank you for giving us the opportunity to share our thoughts, and I leave the floor again to you, Brian.
Thank you very much, Tracy, and I'm so sorry to have to hurry you along there. Without any further ado, can I give the floor to Gulnara? Gulnara, please let us hear about the insights from UNECE. To sit alongside ESCAP.
Thank you very much, Brian. I hope you hear me well.
Thank you, yes.
Yes, so I think the presentation that Tracy gave was a good bridge and maybe a good response, actually, Brian, to your question about connection to the climate change situations. What we indeed see in the region, in the UNECE region, is that many cities have combined impact of the COVID pandemic and climate change. We see the heat wave, very high temperatures in many cities. We see the earthquakes, like in Albania. We see floods in some Central Asian countries. So indeed, I think one of the challenges that we're facing is how we respond to this combined impacts of different disasters. So definitely, probably, you know, since this workshop is organized as a part of the projects that we started recently, I think this is something which we should put to the table of the discussion in the next steps of the projects, how we're actually addressing the combined impacts of different disasters. The second question, probably, since we are discussing now what would be the next steps, is how we are using the instruments of economic recovery, financial support, also strengthening governance. In the UNECE region, which has 56 countries, we saw very different situations. And I think the main difference, which was well demonstrated by the Vienna city, which basically, where Omar said, we already had a very strong city governance structure, which allowed us to develop a very strategic approach and actually very quickly to get back on the feet and address the issues, economic, social, environmental, health issues together. So I think one of the key issues, while we're focusing on the economic recovery, we should be looking really on the governance topic, on the governance at the local level, and also on the governance by bringing together the national local governments, but also different sectors of the economy. Speaking about the UNEC region, we see that the major issues are at the local level, at the city level, are about the loss of incomes. As you see, there is a 71% of the cities reporting the decrease in sales taxes, revenues coming from services, from pyramids, and definitely, as the Mentimeter discussion showed, that the issue of looking at the jobs, employment are very important. However, this is not so straightforward, as we know. Losing the jobs, especially in the grain economy sectors, is being reflected also in the losses of homes, the urgent issues such as issues of homeless people. We see the very serious issues related to the employment in the UNEC region, related to homes for the lower income population, who lives actually in crowded homes with an inadequate internet connection, which we discussed also for many countries is a big issue, because as many of us actually have this privilege of connect and discuss globally through internet, many of people don't have this privilege. The issue of the child care services definitely is a big issue. Housing affordability is not issue only of the lower income population, but also for the middle income population, as we know, especially in the big cities. Also, the middle income population cannot afford adequate housing. So this is an issue of housing which we were discussing actually for many, many years, and the COVID pandemic situation is actually brought it to the front, the issue of affordability and adequacy of housing. I also would like to bring one more issue about the data. I think moving forward, it's very important to promote the evidence-based approaches, because as we don't have a data, we really are not able to fully understand the impacts and to develop the strategic approaches to address the pandemic. And I was also mentioned the both pandemic and also impacts from other disasters. So this will be very important moving forward. Speaking about short-term approaches to address COVID-19 pandemic consequences, but also in integrated way, also outcomes of other disasters. This is we see as the short-term measures that the cities are taking, such as promoting shelters for homeless people, supporting vulnerable groups such as elderly people by providing options for meal delivery, other services in homes, suspending evictions, implementing mortgage and rent relief measures, developing programs for relief of taxes and charges, support to the SMEs and self-employed people. There are also quite a number of medium-term measures, and I think the first one about stimulus packages, which are supporting, as also some of the colleagues, the cities just explained as well, that the stimulus packages which are supporting not only the outcomes of results of pandemics, but also supporting the climate mitigation and promoting climate resilient infrastructure projects, such as retrofitting buildings, better waste management, decentralization of urban energy, food systems, regularization of the informal settlements, improving the housing standards. So this is also in line with what I think at the beginning of this panel discussion was mentioned, the Secretary General policy briefs of how to address the COVID-19 impacts, negative impacts. So basically having very much integrated approaches, looking into jobs, housing, public transport, and also promoting the evidence-based approaches. I think it's also very important that we don't try to start any activities from scratch, but really integrate with the activities which are already working. And as a UNEC, for instance, we were working already on quite a number of the smart sustainable city profile development, which is based on the collection of the data using the key performance indicators for smart sustainable cities, which were elaborated within the initiative United for Smart Sustainable Cities. So development of the smart sustainable city profiles also allow us building capacity of local authorities, because with the cities with whom we're working, and we're working now, as you see on the slides, in quite many cities in Eastern Europe, but also in Western Europe. So this really helps to develop capacities to the developing evidence-based approaches. And this definitely will be a very important tool to develop tailored to the needs strategies to address different hazards. Our work on the smart sustainable cities also is complemented by existing projects on the promoting innovative financing. And this is where we really hope for the further development of this concept within the project that is being done with UNCDF. So I really hope for the next workshops where we can discuss how we can scale up our ongoing work on innovative financing for smart sustainable cities with the approaches of UNCDF. So looking forward very much for this discussion. And finally, just to also mention one of our another project that we're starting right now, which is recovery in informal settlements. We will be developing the regional program for informal settlements with 5 cities as pilot cities. So definitely informal settlements is another very important priority area of work for us, and also I think also for this project, this activity shouldn't be forgotten. Thank you very much. I'm giving Brian back to you the words, and again just to summarize that from our point of view, it's very important to look in very integrated way, looking at different impacts of different hazards, looking really on the governance, on cooperation of different sectors, and also of the national local governments. I think that today's workshop was is a very good example of how we exchange experiences, and definitely there is a need of doing much more of this. Thank you very much. Brian, over to you.
Thank you very much, Gulnara, and thank you to all of our panelists this afternoon, this morning, from the regional commissions from UN Habitat, and also to Tracy Tribica from Albania and Tirana. Oh, fantastic. I love the orbital forest, and I'm so sorry to have to hurry you with that case study, which was so pertinent, as Gulnara said, with the relationship between COVID and climate change. Now, Katja, I don't think there is time really for questions and answers. We are a little overrun. There has been a lot of Q&A activity going on, and I see that some have been posed direct to panelists and they have answered. And of course, there's a lot of activity also in the chat. I see you are recording, so I guess you are going to put this onto one of the UN, perhaps UN Habitat website. Maybe just echo the comments. It's been a fantastic webinar, really wonderful. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and fantastic insights. Now, Katja, to you, or to Kurt and to Esteban?
No, over to me in order to hand over the discussion or the conclusions and closing remarks to our colleagues from the Economic Commissions. I think Kurt will be summarizing his reflections, and then also to Esteban, our colleague. Thanks again, actually, for your patience in sitting in this very interesting workshop webinar. We have gone a bit over time, but I think it is very much worth worth it, and it shows also that we have, you know, a strong interest in presenting the cases, and we definitely invite you to also attend next Monday's workshop, which will be focusing on Latin America, Africa, and the Western Asia region, the Arab region. And Kurt, maybe you would like to summarize your closing observations?
Thank you very much, Katja. And thank you all for what I also agree is a very rich, has been a very rich first dialogue. Special thanks to all of the cities for sharing their challenges and their responses. I think in addition to the health impacts, obviously we're all very much aware of the severe economic consequences of the disruption. But just as cities account for large percentages of GDP nationally and globally, we know, I think for certain, that cities will actually drive national recoveries as well. And those need to be focused to ensure that investments are sound and strategies build resilience against future shocks. I think this, you know, the discussion really brought to the forefront for me many of the long-standing urban issues that, you know, we work with, and I know the other agencies are addressing as well, and the mayors and city officials look at each day. And just to summarize a few of them, one I think that came to the forefront in almost all presentations was addressing inequalities, including safe and affordable housing, access to wash and basic services, but also overcoming the digital divide as access to technology becomes a basic need for education and work. The second would be enabling local governments to contribute not only to the recoveries, but longer term to the achievement of the SDGs and climate targets. And as it relates to the SDGs, we always focus, you know, on a few, but obviously, you know, decent work for all is key to recoveries going forward. I think the third is overcoming the local finance challenges, especially for the intermediate and smaller cities. And building their capacities to develop, manage infrastructure to overcome, you know, existing significant gaps that many cities are already facing, and to plan for the provision of urban services for their growing populations. So I think Atsushi, you know, talked about building back better, and in the context of this project, where we're focused on business and financial environments, enhancing labor markets, I think that has to include informal workers, and looking at economic governance to ensure that no one is left behind. The key elements that I heard today really were focused on, you know, a few real, very specific interventions. One is the need to strengthen local planning. That includes the incorporation of health planning and infrastructure, but also inclusiveness. So including the vulnerable populations in the informal sector, both in business decisions and financial decisions and planning going forward, but also, again, in addressing those specific needs to overcome existing gaps and guard against further inequalities. Generally guarding against the future risks, and it was mentioned you know, many times about climate and focusing on green recovery, including protection of biodiversities, investments in decarbonization, and appropriate smart technologies. Those are all very important. A number of speakers talked about the need to strengthen local and national coordination in the development of recovery strategies. I think almost everyone talked about building stronger governance and what that means and can mean, not just as an activity in this project, but as an institutional outcome in each of the you know, partner cities, bringing together, as Gulnara said, different sectors of the economy, again, not just for a simple activity, but to really guide long-term initiatives. And then also, this is something that Gulnara also, I think, closed on, the need for data and evidence-based approaches. This comes up in almost all initiatives. It was true pre-pandemic, and it will be also post-pandemic. Whether it's about progress against the SDGs or the new urban agenda, climate action, or access to finance or planning future services and infrastructure, collecting and analyzing data and building robust data collection systems will become even more critical as we navigate recoveries and build resilience. So again, thank you all for a very rich discussion. From ESCAP's side, thank you again to all the city representatives, the panelists, our fellow UN agencies and all attendees. This project is ambitious, obviously in its delivery and timeline, but I think the urgency is quite evident, and we're pleased to be working in collaboration with all of you. So thank you again very much. Katja, back to you.
Thank you very much, Court, for summarizing your reflections. Esteban, I would like to hand over to you.
Thanks, Katja. I think that Kurt has done an amazing job in summarizing the workshop. It has been quite intense. We are over half an hour from the end, and we still have more than 100 participants. That shows that it has been very interesting indeed. I mean, many things. I think I fully agree with what Kurt was saying. In addition to that, I will say it's been interesting to see that there are two very strong points here. One is livelihoods, job generation, or the jobless, which is the impact from the COVID. But the other as well has been environment and climate change issues. That is another strong element that has been emphasized during the whole discussion, especially in the chat and in the questions and answers. I think that we have to take both away from this workshop. I think that it's important to make sure that we take care of people and planet, that we make sure that we are in good shape for the future, for what comes next. I'm happy to see as well, because UN Habitat, as you know, Katja, and some of you, has been putting a lot of emphasis in trying to produce this city resilience global program, which objective is basically to have a multi-hazard, multi-stakeholder and multi-sectoral approach to potential shocks and stresses, and to make sure that cities are resilient to whatever comes in future and next. So I think that it has been very important workshop to emphasize that again, that we have to have a multi-hazard approach, that COVID-19, we don't know how long it will last, but for sure it's not the only challenge that we'll have as in cities and in rural areas, of course. And I think that it's important for all of us to be conscious of that and to look at the long term. Two or three more important things that came up quite strongly is the role of the public versus private sectors. That I think it's very relevant, and that's why the multi-stakeholders approach, community level as well, has been emphasized many times. The difference between global and local, global challenges and local responses, I will say. The other part that it's been quite interesting is how do we respond to the immediate emergencies while we think in the long-term sustainability plans, planning as one of the key elements. And the other is the vulnerable groups. I mean, it's quite easy to administrate when you have resources, but it's very difficult to administrate when you have no resources and you have problems in cities. I think that it has been quite rich, and we will definitely take quite a lot from these discussions. We'll use the hub, the Urban Resilience Hub platform as the hub for trying to keep this information ongoing, and well, we will see each other on the 17th for the other workshop. I just want to thank all the participants, the presenters. Special thanks to my own team, Amaya, Anna, Jana, Craig, and Katja is part of the team as well, Atsushi. All of you for supporting today, as well as regional commissions and UNCDF for organizing and co-organizing this event and be part of this initiative. I think it's very important, and it's very important for all of us who are working on the developmental part as well, to make sure that we advance our agenda and try to work during crisis situations and plan better for future. Our policy as UN Habitat is to build the foundations for sustainable urbanization during crisis situations. So I think it's important for us to commend that part. Thanks to all, and over to you, Katja.
Thank you very much. In fact, I would like to also thank the translators for their great work done. I give you a big clap for this, and also we are very sorry for going over time. But as you have seen, that is a very important topic for many of the local governments and people who support or organizations supporting them. So I think it was a great job that you have done. And I would just like to refer, in fact, as many have asked about, you know, the findings and discussions we've had today, where they could access them. We have the City Resilience Hub a website, which is also cityresilienchub.org. Please watch that space very closely. We will keep you updated on the most recent discussions, and also I think the global compendium that Amaya was referring to earlier will include definitely all the findings. We also would like to invite you, if there are any suggestions, to reach out directly to our Urban Resilience Hub team so that we can include some of the points. And I would say herewith officially close the session, and thanks for all the 100+ participants who have still being connected until the end. I wish you a great afternoon and evening wherever you are, and we are looking forward to the next round of this session next Monday. Have a great time. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.